we'll go ahead and call the February 10th, 2026 Town Council meeting to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Excuse me, Councilmember Zabriskie?
Here.
Councilmember Pallavi?
Here.
Councilmember Romack?
Here.
Mayor Klofstad?
Here.
And I will note Vice Mayor Henderson as absent for now.
For now, yes.
For
we
now.
do expect her soon. All right, can we all stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, everybody. Unfortunately, we have another little thing to talk about before we start our council meeting this evening. I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the deeply upsetting incident that occurred this past Saturday at Safeway. As many in our community are aware, a vehicle was intentionally driven into the store and towards children and their parents. While we're profoundly grateful that no life-threatening injuries were sustained, this was a really traumatic event for our community, and it's left a lasting impact on those injured and those who witnessed it. So Truckee, I think we all would agree, is a town that prides itself on being a small town, having a small town feel and sense of closeness, and that kind of generates a feeling of safety that we really do hold dear, and unfortunately this incident violated that. Incidents like this are difficult to comprehend, especially when they happen to our youth and in such an unnecessary but yet intentional manner. It was a sobering reminder that even in our community, and as caring and connected as we are, we're not immune from tragedy. So on behalf of the Town Council and the Town of Truckee, we extend our heartfelt support for the individuals and families who were injured. And please know that you are in our thoughts, and our hearts are here to support you. I also want to express sincere gratitude to town staff and our first responders, particularly our police department, for their swift and professional response, and for doing all the work necessary to ensure that the suspect stands trial for their actions. So we do have a small update from the chief in a little bit on this item, but Truckee PD, we really want to say thank you for your service, care, and dedication to this community. Okay, with that, we're going to open the meeting up for general public comment. So this is an opportunity for anybody in the audience to come to the podium and share thoughts on anything not on the current agenda. Is there anybody that is interested in making a statement? Come on up. Please state your name, and you have 3 minutes following the timer here on your right.
Mary, can you push the green button? We can't hear you.
How about now? Okay. Good evening, council members. My name is Mary Braulio, and I'd like to share with you a story about something that happened to me last week while at work. I think most of you are familiar enough with me to know that I work at a business on West River Street in downtown Truckee. Last Tuesday, I decided to walk over to Jack's to order some lunch. On my way in, I noticed what appeared to be an unhoused man sitting on the corner of the parking lot. When I came out, he was gone. I didn't give him another thought as I went back to work to get a few things done while I waited for my order. A few minutes later, everything changed and my sense of security was gone. The man who'd been sitting on the corner was suddenly standing at my office door, and then he was standing in my office at my desk. It was clear to me that he had followed me, and if I had told you last Tuesday that I immediately knew I was staring at the face of evil and that I have never felt more terrified of another human being in my entire life, you probably would have scoffed. You probably would have blown me off as being overly dramatic and facetious. But what a difference a week can make. 4 days after my encounter, this same individual drove his car into a group of kids who were fundraising in front of Safeway, and I am devastated. I don't understand how or why or what guardian angels I had watching over me that day, but I came out of my encounter physically unharmed. I do understand how incredibly lucky I am and how incredibly different my circumstances could have been. To Chief Renfro, I am grateful for Truckee PD's response last Tuesday and for the kindness and compassion that Officer Ratcliffe has shown me over the last week while checking in on me. I know Truckee cares deeply about compassion, but compassion must exist alongside safety. Truckee may feel like a small town, but we are facing challenges that look more like those of much larger communities. And that means we need to start thinking differently about how we manage public spaces, expectations for behavior, and enforcement. What happened to me was a warning. What happened at Safeway shows how high the stakes really are. I keep asking myself, what more could I or should I have done to help prevent this tragedy? And tonight I'm here to ask you, what are you going to do? Because asking residents and businesses to just endure this is not acceptable. It is time to start acting like a town that takes safety seriously. It is time to implement real enforcement, real consequences, and real expectations for behavior in public spaces. And it is time to stop waiting until someone else gets hurt or killed before we act. I love this town. I want to feel safe here, and I want other women, workers, and families to feel safe too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burlio.
J.D. Haas for the record. Terrifying. The first thing Mary did when the gentleman came into the store, she put him on speakerphone. She called me on speed dial. I was quiet. I listened very closely. And immediately I knew we had a situation. Within moments, I asked that, I made a voice. I said, should I call the police? He looked at her, and later she told me and said, it's a good thing he did that. This was on Tuesday before the car attack. This is the same exact guy. So we have a situation. We have this facility opening on Friday, which is very important to us, desperately needed. But let me tell you, this guy checked all the boxes. He has ties to Truckee. He has family in Truckee. He's homeless. He would have been one of the people coming. He could sign up. We need to learn from this, of who's coming to this community. Hundreds of people stood in this room and talked about this a year ago. And they were looked at as they were scared and homeless haters. And now look where we're at today. They were concerned deeply as residents in this community. So as we move into this new venue coming on Friday and the ribbon cutting, I urge members of the council of THAC. They have not been to Reno yet to see the Volunteers of America and the Hope Project. I have been there. I've been inside. I've talked with them. I just want you to understand what's going on outside the gates on a daily basis and inside the gates on a basis, and the good work they're doing, but also the things that are happening around and the people that come with it. And it is so important that we are prepared for this, because it's going to happen starting Friday. More are going to come. And yes, I'm the one who suggested the place. I did. So I feel some weight on my shoulders too. And I want to see help. For 2 years during the general plan, I hope you remember that when I sat about right there, my number one thing was, what are we going to do for mental health? What are we going to do? I stood up the whole time for 2 years. We're doing it now. Let's make sure we're prepared. Let's make sure we have the right people in place and that we're ready for this new venture that we're all moving into to help other folks out. I'm sorry for all the victims. I wish we could have done more.
Thank you, Mr. Haas.
I'm Bree Waters. For the record, I'm the president of Truckee Little League. I'm also the team manager of the Tahoe Titans, the team that got ran over, not just driven towards, but ran over on Saturday. I was told a year ago that we could no longer have our Truckee Little League parade that's been happening here since 1960 because there's too much crime at the Artist Lofts. The police force is spread too thin. What is happening in this town, I was born and raised in Tahoe City. I went to North Tahoe. My husband went to Truckee High School. Our kids go here. This is not the same town it was even 5 years ago since you guys have been in charge. I don't know what's going on, but there's homeless people everywhere and they are dangerous. And what happened this weekend, you are putting, our youth is in danger. My children are terrified. Kids are broken. And I sat in an arraignment today and looked right at him and I stared at him. 8 charges of attempted murder. And these individuals are coming to our town. You see them on the corner. You see them in front of 7-Eleven. I don't want my kids to walk to 7-Eleven anymore. And they're here. And I can't host a Little League parade that's been going on since 1960 because there's not enough police force. And everybody banded together, the CHP, the town of Truckee, the police. We had our Little League parade because everybody in this town supports all of us. But I'm shaking. I can't. I look at this man just as you looked at him, just pure evil. I don't have any answers, but the direction we're going in is not the right one. Putting Section 8 housing in our neighborhoods is not the right one. Busing people in from out of town because they don't meet the requirements. Like our town people don't meet the requirements. They make too much money to live in low-income housing, so we bus them in. That's not the answer. These people aren't from around here. They're coming here and they're destroying our town and they're hurting our children now.
Thank you, Ms. Waters. Are there any other general public comment? Okay, seeing none, I appreciate everybody that came and spoke, and we hear you. This is a really impactful time. As you know, we can't respond or give direction to an item that's not on the agenda, but I am quite certain that staff and the chief of police heard your concerns. We will have further discussions on this issue, and we all are focused on the success of what we have created in the Navigation Center, and these types of things are going to be part of what we need to make sure we are considering as we move this forward. So thank you, everybody. Okay, with that, we're going to move to our presentations. Erin Brewster has a presentation on our Sustainability Program Manager and the Rebate Finder.
Yes, good evening, Council. I wanted to take some time tonight to highlight our new Energy Rebate Finder that launched at the beginning of this year. You may remember that this was an action item highlighted in the existing building decarbonization roadmap that was adopted last spring. The goal of this is to help connect our residents and businesses with incentives that are available for building upgrades and to collect in one place all of the available energy-related rebates available from our local utilities, state agencies, and federal programs. So this incentive finder was completed late last year and went live just at the beginning of the year. It was built by through a partnership with Resolve Rebates. Resolve is a Truckee locally owned company. Its co-founder is a Truckee resident. And it's customized to our programs that are specifically available here in Truckee, so that our residents don't need to sift through all of the different utilities in the state, and they can just see the ones that are relevant to them. So as you will see, there you can search for residential or commercial rebates. And there's a variety of different upgrade categories that are covered. Most of them are energy related, but we did include some fire resilience rebates as well, especially because they overlap with a lot of the types of upgrades that you might do for energy efficiency. So if we select windows, you'll see there's some utility programs, and there's also the Truckee Fire District home hardening upgrades, which also cover windows. So we want to make sure everyone is available of all the funding that might be there, and hopefully if they're replacing a window, they would not only choose one that's energy efficient, but also one that's more fire resilient as well. So there's, to show you some of the features of this platform, if say you were looking for to upgrade your water heater, you can filter by water heating, and then you can select your utility provider, electric utility provider, just to get a little bit more specific. So say you're a TDPUD customer, and then you see just the upgrades that might be, or the incentives that might be available to you. So there's some from TDPUD, some from Southwest Gas if you have gas water heating, and also a state program that's not currently operating, but if that comes back online, that would be highlighted as well. So you can see there's a lot of features on this platform. You can get a little bit more details about the rebate. A lot of these have pretty complicated eligibility criteria. So this platform is designed to help residents navigate a little bit of those details. So it's highlighting a few of the things that you're going to have to, if you're interested in this rebate, what you need to be prepared to provide, the documentation you need to have, and then what your contractor will need to do, like taking before and after photos. So it pulls out a little bit of those details from the application. There's also, for some, a quick eligibility checker. So just a few quick questions to make sure that you would actually qualify. And so we'll just make sure it's new equipment, you're using a licensed contractor, and that the equipment's eligible. And then you can see if the rebate amount you're eligible for may vary depending on what type of equipment you're replacing, or if it's new construction, it's going to tell you you're not eligible. So it's really trying to capture a lot of the information in a more user-friendly platform than the standard rebate application might have on your utility page. And then if you want to apply, you can just click that visit button and it will take you right to the application. So one of the benefits of this program or this platform is that we get a lot of calls from residents or businesses who are interested in doing upgrades, and they don't really know what's available or where to start. And so this keeps all of that information in one page, and it also automatically checks for updates. So it is an AI-powered platform that does have supporting human staff. So it will automatically make sure on whatever frequency we want that these programs are up to date in the platform, and then we can always ask them to update if we are launching a new program and want to add that immediately as well. It does also have a chatbot feature that our IT team helped vet for us, but you can see there's some suggested questions. So you can ask it what rebates are available for heat pumps, for example, and it's gonna, even though you can filter that, you can also just ask the chatbot and it will pull that information. And you could also ask it, do I need a permit for that? And it's going to tell you, yes, you do, and point you to our buildings division to get that information. So we did just launch this, and we're always happy to take some feedback and improve it. But it's an exciting new tool, and we want to encourage everyone, if they're doing an upgrade project, to check it out and make sure they're taking advantage of all the incentive programs that are available.
That's pretty slick. Thank you. Stick around in case we have a couple of questions. So next we have the town manager's report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was going to ask Chief to give an update, but I think he stepped out to connect with Ms. Waters. So he was just going to share that there was an arraignment today, and the suspect involved in the Safeway incident is being held without bail and being charged with, among other things, 8 counts of attempted murder. So that's the most recent news that we have to share. I would echo your sentiments in that all of town staff are thinking about everybody that was at the site on Saturday, the families and the children, and keeping them in their thoughts and trying to give them some space to heal and recover from that incident, and just the sad reminder that we are not immune to these types of accidents here. So, or these types of intentional acts here, I'm sorry. As a follow-up, also, the ribbon cutting for the Navigation Center is on Friday, as JD referenced. It starts at 3:30 p.m. That is down on Deerfield Drive in the building behind Taco Bell. One clarification, the center itself is not opening on Friday. There is not an open date yet, as some of the tenant improvements are still in process. So we'll be doing a ribbon cutting, but not an opening at this point. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions from council on either of the presentations?
I have just one for Aaron. Actually, it's a compound question, Aaron. Has to do with the updating. By coincidence, I looked at the website recently. It's really nice and easy to navigate. My question is about, when do updates generally occur at the state and federal level, changes occur? And then how is the town making sure to keep this website up to date in light of those changes that occur?
So there's no standard update timeline for the state programs. A lot of them are individually created and will launch on their own timeline, and then are sort of available until they're fully subscribed. And so the utilities, some of them, our local utilities, have a kind of do that at the beginning of the year. They'll update their programs, but it varies. We have the flexibility with this rebate provider, or the platform provider, Resolve Rebates, to tell them what frequency we want their platform to check automatically for updates with the agencies that it indexes. And so this rebate platform is used more widely. And so for the state programs, it is indexing those for a variety of local incentive finder platforms. It checks pretty frequently, but we can tell them to update them as often as we want, weekly if we wanted to. Usually that's not necessary, but it's flexible, and we kind of work with them to determine what update frequency is best.
Thank you, Aaron.
I had one question as well. So Resolve Rebates helped us build this. Do we link to their site where people can utilize their program to submit automatically?
So right now, we've only contracted with them for this incentive finder platform at the current time. They do have the capability to support rebate program applications, and that was something that Sierra Business Council did use for the town's Dark Skies rebate program that they were operating for us. We are exploring that as a potential option for rebate if the town launches energy rebate, our own rebate programs, then we could utilize that feature, but it is not used for third-party rebate. So right now the platform is just directing users to the utility application forms. And that's until we launch our own rebate, that's the features that we would be offering.
Do you know if any of our existing utilities utilize their rebate platform?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, thank you. We good? Okay, I'll open up the presentations to public comment. Does anybody have any public comment on the presentations we received? Okay, seeing none. We will move on to consent. So these are items that are considered regular business and non-controversial. I'll go ahead and read through them. I'm going to adopt the minutes of the January 27th, 2026 regular meeting and the January 29th, 2026 workshop. Reaffirm council expectations, norms, and working relationships. Item 6.3, cannabis tax fund grant application. And item 6.4, contract amendment and spending authorization increase with Bureau Veritas? How do you say that? Close enough, North America. Does any council wish to pull an item? Any member of staff? Any member of the public? Okay, with that, I'll look for a motion.
I move we adopt the
Oh, hold
consent
on,
calendar.
hold on. We do need to open this up for public comment. Are there any public comments on any of the consent agenda items? Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah, I move we adopt the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, with that, we would normally be jumping into discussion item 7.1, but we are going to pull this item from this evening's discussions. However, if there is anybody in the audience that came tonight to make a public comment on this agenda item, which is the Measure V renewal and call for election, we would welcome your public comment at this time. Seeing none, we are going to move on, right, to agenda item 7.2, which is the council priorities work plan and quarterly update. And that's you, Jen?
That is me, and I'm going to tag team with Chris Hardy, who's going to join me up here.
Excellent.
We're going to see if I can operate this sitting here and test the skills there. So, okay, I'm going to start, introduce this item. We're going to have Chris talk a little bit about some of the work that him and his team are doing in our IT division. And then he'll hand it back over to me and we'll finish up, but it should be pretty brief. So this is your regular quarterly update for the period ending December 31st, 2025. And I would just highlight that, as always, there's a little bit of overlap, so you might get a little bit of information on things that happened in January, but we do our best to try to keep it at a December 31st timeline. Is it gonna, oops, it's not working, you're gonna have to do it. Thanks. In terms of headline accomplishments for this period, we had the retrofit incentive finder that you just heard about from Aaron. That's complete, active, and live, which we're very excited about. The Pilot Navigation Center is scheduled to open very soon. The ribbon cutting is this Friday, as I mentioned. Opening date to be determined, but probably a couple weeks out, just pending those final tenant improvements on the inside of the building. Public alerting platform, so many people have heard, but if not, the Code Red system is no longer going to be our alerting system due to some security breaches with that platform. Nevada County has issued an RFP for a new system, and we're working closely with them on that. But we will have to go through the process of having people sign up, opt in for those notifications. We have some of that data, but not all of it. So that is a new add to the work plan as a result of that, and some additional time will be spent in communications and efforts to get people signed up for the new platform once that's been identified and selected. And then our permit tracking software, Cloud Permit, that is our new software system that we are very excited is still on track to launch with the building module May 1st. Thereabouts, maybe a week or two later, code enforcement will be launching as well, that module, and then phase 2 will have planning and the public works modules. But we are still on track for the building department ahead of the active season. So we're excited about that. And now I'm going to hand it over to Chris. If you will recall from our last quarterly update, we decided to try something a little different this year with this 2-year work plan and highlight some of the work that's happening maybe behind the scenes or you don't get as much detail from. And Chris was excited to volunteer and share the very cool things that our IT department is doing. So Chris, take it away.
Mayor, Council, Chris Hardy, Chief Information Officer for the record. So I think we are a very special town in a lot of different ways. And fortunately, in my division, I get to interact with most of our departments. And we get to think about things a little differently. And so I worked for a large city before I came to the town of Truckee. And one of the things that really struck me is we had an entire floor of a building dedicated to e-waste. And essentially what we would do is we would take all of our used desktops, used laptops, phones, so on and so forth. We'd put them in a room and they would sit there for about the next 4 to 5 years until we decided it was time to take them to the landfill. And so I'm lucky enough to work for the town of Truckee, and asked early on if we could maybe do something better. And so for context, we do need to replace devices. That's a given. There's security compliance goals that we must meet. And frankly, our staff sometimes need more powerful workstations, yes. But the frequency in which we need to replace things, I think, gets called into question, and what exactly we're replacing it with. So today I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I think we've done as a town that are really special and unique, and something that not a lot of other agencies or towns or cities are doing, and maybe inspire others to do the same. So I guess starting with the beginning, you know, when I first got here, we went from a 3 to a 5 year cycle, and I think you could do the math on laptops and replacements, and going to a 5 year cycle, how less frequently you're going to replace devices. What we decided to do is buy slightly better devices that the staff liked a little bit more and kept them for longer. And wouldn't you know, they were happier with the device. We had to replace them a whole lot less. And not only that, just the devices were better overall, so we were able to keep them longer, which made it more financially responsible for the town. In doing that process, we started to ask, how do we do this long term? You know, and what are we going to do with our existing devices? And so we actually put together a standard operating procedure that says, first we're going to attempt to sell devices as soon as they're deemed decommissioned from the town. After that, we're going to attempt to give them out to nonprofits in the community. And we have Andrea in the back that has run a fabulous program, and she actually brought in some of the recipients that have been receiving this technology. And finally, we offer it to town staff, and if nobody else takes it, then we take it to the landfill. And so in this process, we've been able to give to Sierra Community House, the Truckee Roundhouse, a lot of local agencies, and a lot of great people in need. And again, if there's any desires to ask question where these devices are going, I think Andrea is a great representative of that. But from the Truckee IT team, what we really have done is we've brought in interns, and we've taught them how to do Department of Defense level wiping of devices, and then reinstalling operating systems from the ground up. So every device that we have is essentially brand new in terms of being able to log in and use the device. So there's no devices that we actually gave out that weren't in a working state. We did our best to give them, give that back to the community. Other examples, the Truckee Roundhouse has some of our wireless access points. Those could have easily ended up in the dump, things like that as we work towards things. So really, it's just about thinking when we go through the process, what is the right thing to do here? Does it make sense for us to get a device, give it out to town staff, and then when the device is no longer needed, throw it in a closet and build a repository of things that should be, that will ultimately end up in the landfill, or should we give it back to the community? So since we started tracking, this is not everything, and honestly, I way undershot this just because I didn't want to overshoot anything, but we've given over 150 devices away and large electronics. Roughly, that's over 3,600 pounds of things prevented from going to the landfill and going back to residents, back to nonprofits in our community. Over 100 square feet if you were to, add everything up and put it in a room together, and we averted a ton of carbon. One of the things that I really wanted to hammer home here, though, is this is not just devices. I think one of the things that we've done really good at the town is even incorporating this into our RFPs. So an example of that is all of our multifunction printers. We have around 10 in the town. There's these massive printers and scanner copiers. We implemented in the RFP that any incumbent vendor that was going to be replacing these needed to prove to us that those machines would either be reused for parts or responsibly recycled, and we got certificates for all of those things. And I have a lot of other examples. Our dial pad cloud phone system replacement, you wouldn't believe with our legacy phone system how many phones I had to take to the dump. Never again. Most of our staff are now fully on a cloud-based phone system. We don't need to have desk phones. We try to educate everyone before rolling out that system that they no longer needed that unless they absolutely wanted it. Mobile device management, when I got here, we had hundreds of iPhones and iPads that were no longer usable because they were deployed to staff, and then when given back to us, we couldn't get the password off of them. So I worked with my team to make sure that we prioritized it, not only for security, but again, like for financial responsibility, to avert things from going to the junkyard, so on and so forth. And the last example I want to give, and there's many more than this because it is something that we truly think about with every initiative, is being a statewide leader. So for those of you that don't know, around 5 years ago, the town was hit with a devastating ransomware attack. A lot of the equipment was taken down, it was encrypted, and we had to buy and rebuild. In that process, we ended up with a lot of legacy servers and storage. We actually had one member on our team, Logan, that got a little creative, and we reached out to our counterparts over here at the CalSIC, also known as the California Cybersecurity Integration Center, then under Cal OES. What you need to know is that they are the pinnacle in California for training on cybersecurity. And they actually ended up taking a lot of our server storage and things that were encrypted, they were completely unusable to us, and they're training cyber teams throughout all of California on this equipment now. Very heavy, took up a lot of space. Anyone else, I promise you, would have taken it to the landfill because it was financially worthless. But now all of California benefits from it. And it's just because I feel like at the town we're good about asking questions and finding people that may be willing to take on stuff like that. So, and final, a decision point, does the town think that this is worth our time? Utilizing technicians to repurpose equipment so that it can go back out. And I encourage you in asking that, question, if it's yes or no, to absolutely speak to Andrea, because she is the one in our community that has been doing a lot of the facilitation by design. So us in IT, we don't accept any equipment because of conflict of interest, obviously. And also, she does a better job at it. So with that, that's everything that I have. Any questions, or I think we're going to save that?
Yeah, Chris, if you don't mind continuing to drive for me, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end. I do want to remind council that Andrea, thank you for doing translation for us, but we need to speak slower so that she can keep up. Oftentimes that's very hard to do at a fast pace, so please be aware of that. And I will say that Chris and his team bring the same level of enthusiasm every day to all of their IT work in the town, and we're really fortunate to have a great IT team and all of their innovation and excitement for the work that they are doing. Next slide, thank you. So some quick recaps of the quarter progress for your 5 priority areas. Really kind of going to tee off of the story of the quarter in each of these 5 focus areas. We are in contract and working on the evacuation study that's townwide and Tahoe Donner specific. So as a reminder, Tahoe Donner is paying for their evacuation study, but we are partnered with them and doing them both in collaboration so that there's some consistency in data and the information provided. Chris and team have been rolling out Box, which is our new kind of shared data source for our all of our files, and that implementation is going well. All of the users are trained, so that's been positive. And then our alerting system that I spoke about earlier is just a new add to the work plan. In terms of environmental sustainability, focusing on reducing waste and changing habits. All of our businesses are in compliance with the single-use bottle ordinance, so that's great news. The retrofit launch or incentive finder has been launched. Our heat pump incentive program will be coming back to you very soon, in early this year, so within the next month or so. We'll have that back in front of you, and then staff continues to work with Okapi on just communications and outreach on the reusable coffee mugs and reusable foodware items that they offer. For communication, our language access plan is in process. Outreach is underway. Andrea is leading that effort and trying to understand what information is really most valuable to our community members to help guide that document and what we will provide in translated materials and that sort of thing. We have formed our IDEA committee, our internal committee. We have 16 members from each department. So they had their first meeting in early January. And again, the cloud permit software is on track and targeted to be launching right at the start of the building season. For workforce housing, a little bit of a strategy shift where we've really merged the concepts of homegrown housing and the density bonus program. You've been talking about that a lot lately. A couple more conversations, one tonight and a future one to hopefully adopt new program guidelines and hear the incentives built in from a development code perspective. Still working on the housing element update, but that will be coming back late spring for consideration. And then again, continuing to support the navigation center and the unhoused services. And then lastly, for your priorities is the infrastructure and connectivity. We were all excited to adopt the PIEs after many, many years of needing to be updated. That will move to more of an annual update, so it's less of a lift each year. The active transportation plan is moving forward. RFP is ready and about to go out, so we're making some progress on that. And then the Rally Road Mobility Hub and Reimagine Bridge Street. We're just waiting for some approvals from Union Pacific and the CPUC. As you have seen in the staff report, and we talk about, we have kind of these other priority areas that not necessarily core services or maybe adjacent to core services, but are consuming maybe a bit more time or something that we want to make sure that you're aware of that we're working on, or the community. Some of the big progress in here is we did switch dental benefits, so that was a pretty big lift. And then continuing to work through NeoGov, which has been really successful from a recruitment perspective, getting lots of really great applications for all of our recruitments that are going out on that platform. In fact, the IT team just finished up a recruitment. I think they interviewed today for a technician level and had 178 applications come through for that position, and lots of very qualified applicants as well. So that's been really exciting to see. We have not added anything to the bike rack this quarter. You did receive one public comment asking about the public art master plan update, so just wanted to highlight that. It is currently in the bike rack. So wanted to make that point. And then lastly, in summary, we have good momentum. We're 90% through or working on most of the items in the work plan, 60% completion rate. And then we do have some delays. Some of that is waiting until staffing comes on board with some of our new positions, but the majority are waiting for some outside entity approvals that are just pausing things at the moment. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. I know this was a pretty high-level flyover of the work plan, but you're pretty accustomed to seeing this item at this point. So we'd look for you to provide direction, any feedback, accept the work plan report, and if you have any questions for Chris, I know he'd be excited to answer them.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, the staff report on this was very thorough and helpful, and thank you for this presentation. Do we have any council questions from this side? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was curious, Chris, since you highlighted Andrea might have some more insight into the technology recycling and community program, if Andrea wouldn't mind providing a little more insight into groups she's worked with.
And if you don't mind, I'll say it in Spanish after so that they can hear. Y si no les molesta, lo voy a decir en español también después de decirlo en inglés para que ustedes puedan escuchar. Yes, as soon as Chris's team has something available, I reach out to our partners, which, like Chris said, includes Sierra Community House, Truckee Donor Parks and Rec, the Promotoras directly, Sierra Senior Services, most of the agencies that we partner with, like the community-based organizations, the library, and I just say things like, hey, we have a TV. Does anybody want it. And then, honestly, the first person that says I want it is the person who gets it. Cuando a mí me llega algún equipo o cualquier cosa del equipo de Chris que me dicen, oh, tengo esta tele o esta computadora, yo hablo con con las personas o las organizaciones con las que estamos asociados, que son, por ejemplo, Sierra Community House o el Distrito de Parques y Recreación, la biblioteca, los servicios a los adultos mayores, y como ustedes han visto, le pongo, tenemos una tele, ¿quién la quiere? Y la primera persona que diga, la quiero yo, a esa persona se la doy. It depends. Like, there are things that go like super quickly, right? Like phones. I feel like people are like fighting for it, almost like phones, laptops, TVs, things like that go immediately. There are things that are a little bit harder to give to people, like the desktops. We recently had like 11, but more than 10 desktops that were just a desktop, no monitor, no keyboard, no nothing. And that one took a while to figure out what to do with, but because of tech teens, we realized that a lot of the kids want them just to open them and see how they work and just kind of play with it. So I reached out to TTUSD and I said, hey, we have all these desktops. I mean, they're usable, but you want them for kids to like open up. And they took them all, and they've been using them during technology classes to open them up and then put them back together so that the next class can also use them. So it's like a continuous, the picture that Chris had was one of the kids like opening them up, and they've been really grateful about that. Las personas que los reciben, hay muchas cosas que se van así como súper rápido, los teléfonos, las iPads, las computadoras, como las laptops, pero hay cosas que no, como las computadoras de escritorio que teníamos, que no tenían teclado, monitor ni nada, y gracias al programa de Adolescentex, nosotros nos dimos cuenta que los chavos pues quieren abrir las computadoras, ver cómo funcionan, todo eso. Entonces yo me puse en contacto con el distrito escolar, les dije, hey, tenemos todo esto, ¿lo quieren? Dijeron que sí, y ahora los chavos en la clase de tecnología en la middle school abren las cosas y luego las vuelven a cerrar, como que las deshacen y luego las vuelven a poner para que otras personas las puedan seguir haciendo. I know, because I see it all the time, that the community is really grateful to have these devices, and it's been really helpful for people that otherwise could not have a working phone, or a lot of the laptops have gone to kids or college kids that like need it, but they're out of the school system, so they no longer have a Chromebook, but they really can't afford it. So it's one of my favorite programs here, and for everything that Chris said, but also for seeing the impact that it's had. A mí me gusta muchísimo este programa porque sé que mucha de la gente que los recibe de otra manera no podría tener, por ejemplo, un teléfono que funcione, o chavos que están en la universidad y que no, como ya salieron de la escuela de aquí, pues ya no tienen las Chromebooks, pero pueden recibir estos equipos que les ayudan bastante, y por eso es uno de los programas que más me gustan, por todo lo que dijo él, pero también por el impacto que yo he visto que tiene en la comunidad. I don't know if you have any questions.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for me.
Councilmember Pallavi?
Yeah, I just have one. Chris, your enthusiasm for your projects is clearly evident and quite contagious, and it's amazing that you've been able to impart that to the folks working in your department. So congratulations on that. It's really exciting. You were asking us to check in a little bit on that, and I guess my question is more, what does it take to ramp this up? I think we probably all are gonna support you continuing in the minor ask that you gave us, or at least that's my impression. What does it take to ramp it up and either help other special districts or large organizations do this, and or add it on as potentially a full program area in the Keep Truckee Green portfolio potentially, or something like that?
So I think the first and foremost is having a procedure and knowing how to follow it. Again, you want to make sure that everything is ready and end of life. I think that's kind of the thing, and you have to know when that end point is. So we have lots of spreadsheets and everything that we need to track, stuff like that. But I think most importantly is once we know a device's end of life, moving very quickly and having that procedure and knowing exactly the steps in it. We're going to attempt to sell. These are exactly who we're going to try and sell it to. If that does not work, quickly move on to the next step, which is getting it out into the community. That's the important part. I think that's where a lot of others may struggle. They kind of maybe start going the direction and then it gets hard and they don't have the next step ironed out. So I think once we had that policy, we started to see things quickly ramp up. And then once we, have the backing of the town and everybody else and, somebody to help distribute it like Andrea, everything just flows as it naturally should. So right now, again, like we have intern level IT team doing this. So it's like very low hours spent and kind of turnkey.
So I think in order to continue and or expand is to continue supporting the interns that are hired, and that's part of the budget discussion. As long as we know that staff capacity is there, I think we could probably get to a point where we're sharing. I mean, this is part of it right here, is sharing out what we're doing. I think it's fairly unknown that the team is doing this, so we can connect with the other special districts if we know we have the staff availability to help. Maybe either they develop same process or they bring some of their stuff over if we have capacity to wipe it and distribute it, or at least help distribute it.
Thank you. Great job.
Welcome, Vice Mayor Henderson.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for staff?
I do not. Thank you for the report. It's always wonderful to see these come forward, and apologies for being late.
Grace. Councilmember Zabriskie.
Yeah. Following up on Councilmember Pallavi, I think the question for us is how does this work fit in with all the other responsibilities of the IT department? Because I understand it is the IT department that's carrying the load here. And I looked, 150 devices at a minimum have been recycled. So if it's 20 minutes apiece, on average, that's 50 hours right there. So it's back to you. How does it fit in with your other priorities?
Well, I think, speaking to what Jen said, obviously having the help of funded positions for the technicians is great. And just so council knows, no matter what, we're going to have to Department of Defense level wipe these devices. We can't just take them to the landfill as is anyway. So it's part of that's the first longest step in this process. The second step would just be installing the operating system and connecting with Andrea. So, to answer your question, because the interns are the ones that are now responsible for this process, if you look on our work plan, most of the things that we're targeting are very high level, sophisticated, complicated technology deployments. The interns, we hope one day to get them there, but this is like a good first start. So supporting those positions definitely helps this project and this program. And I think, if we continue doing it, it's just kind of that second part of what do we do with the device after we wipe it.
Okay. And then on spreading this skill, this program to other jurisdictions, when a jurisdiction makes a better mousetrap, there's often multiple ways of sharing that. And I would expect this would be something we'd be happy to see, put another feather in the town's cap.
I would love nothing more than that. We, again, have a full policy or procedure that we're willing to share with others if it helps. Not only that, the acceptance forms. Again, thank you to Andrea because she has a Spanish one as well. So like we have English and Spanish forms for, accepting these materials that have been vetted by our legal team. So things like that, I think could help others get off the ground quickly.
Okay.
Maybe I'm going to infer this a little bit, but I'm sensing there's a lot of support for this, and perhaps we can work with the CTA and share the information out through the Client Transformation Alliance.
I was just going to suggest that. This seems like a really apropos project that maybe we could do a short presentation to the CTA on as well. Okay.
Okay, and then I have one more question for Chris and then a couple for Jen. Going to the written answers to council's written questions, I had asked I want to get a better understanding of what the, oh gosh, where was it? The
Box.
digital databases being part of the town's enterprise information, the content management system. And the answer was Box is used for file storage and collaboration and to protect files stored in the platform.
Correct.
What do you say in the platform?
Yeah.
You lost me. What?
I can absolutely help with that. I think the easiest way to think about this solution is it is a replacement for legacy file servers. So what we have on-prem right now, so think about all the storage and compute necessary for
On-prem means
maintaining.
on-premise.
Sorry. I think Nikki said on premise. So yeah, our data center here locally. Essentially that file system is what our town staff use on a daily basis, right? Box is a way to cloud compute, kind of the same thing. And in doing so, again, we reduce our footprint, the hardware that we're procuring here on site, things like that. The enterprise catalog that you spoke to, that's every piece of software we have in the town. So that's going to be everything from, Microsoft to Cloud Permit coming. Obviously, we're not going to be storing those files in the same system, Box, so Box would not be protecting it. But anything that's in the file server today that will be migrated over to Box, Box will serve as the protecting point for that.
Okay, thank you. And then for Jen, I noticed that you showed permit tracking being 50% complete, and then application tracking being 98% complete.
Yes, two different systems. So the permit tracking system is Cloud Permit. That's the one that will have the building module going live in May, quickly followed by code enforcement. The applicant tracking system is our NeoGov system, where employees or potential employees are submitting their employment applications for job announcements through that system.
Okay, job application.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
It is very confusing with all the acronyms and all the different systems that we are using.
Okay, and then my other question is, it shows community greenhouse gas inventory having a completion date of June 2027, and then biomass June 2026 with a 2% completion on the biomass. Are those dates still accurate, or are we pushing those back?
Yeah, biomass will likely push. We've been participating in the regional meetings on biomass, but really trying to figure out still the best location and the best partnership with potential agencies, moving sites and locations and working with that. We just don't have a better time frame at this point.
Okay, and then on the community greenhouse gas inventory, June 27 is maybe when we just get started on it, or?
Erin's heading up to the microphone to
thank
give
you,
you more
Erin.
details.
Hello, yes. So Erin Brewster, Sustainability Program Manager, for the record. So the next scheduled community-wide inventory we have is for the 2025 calendar year. So there's a little over a year delayed after the completion of the calendar year until all that data is available. So we wouldn't be able to start that inventory until early 2027.
Thank you for sharing that once again. You just reminded me. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Zabriskie. I don't have any additional questions, but I would just like to recognize our tech repurposing recipients that came to join us tonight. Thank you so much. If you want to raise your hands and give a little wave, we'd love that. Thank you. We'll keep it flowing. Help us repurpose these things and make sure they have a good use. Okay, with that, we will open this agenda item for public comment. Does anybody have public comment on item 7.2, our work plan? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Or we
Mayor,
do?
there is public comment.
Okay,
Yeah.
if you could please come to the podium. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Pues yo solamente les quiero decir gracias por tener esto que dan lo que ustedes ya no ocupan. Ha habido mucho impacto. Yo le he dado a varios jóvenes que no tienen computadora para seguir estudiando, televisiones para gente que no tienen televisión, celulares que personas que han llegado de otros países que no tienen el recurso para comprarlo y tienen un celular con ellos. Solamente yo les digo que sigan pensando en nosotros que no podemos con los recursos tener algo. Gracias.
I'm just here to say thank you. We've given some of these devices to a lot of people. I've given some computers to youth that otherwise wouldn't be able to have one, TVs for people that don't have a TV, phones for people that are coming in from other countries that wouldn't otherwise have the resources to get these. I just urge you to keep thinking of us, keep thinking of the community. We sometimes just don't have the resources, so I just want to say thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. Any other public comment on this agenda item? All right. Moving back to council for deliberation or discussion. Have any comments over here?
Chris, I feel like what you said in your presentation of how can we do better just embodies the spirit that I know all staff has, and just really appreciate, we don't just skate by and do the bare minimum. It's how can we make a bigger impact? And it's so great to see the impact that we're making in our community. So really appreciate your team's dedication, the creativity of staff of thinking of great ways to repurpose old equipment. So fully in support of continuing the program. I think great idea going to CTA and how could we expand it. And then just kudos again. I was at the chamber board meeting before this, and I again highlighted our work plan as a great opportunity for community members to really stay in the loop of what's going on. So, you know, you're hearing it now, but you can also go back and read the full report if there's an item you remember hearing about a year ago, and you can check where the progress is at. So just kudos to staff for continuing this work plan.
And I'll add to that on our town council page, the work plan is linked as well as all the details. So it's very accessible, very transparent. Anybody at any time can go and find any of these items on here.
Ditto to everything Councilmember Romack just said. Nothing additional to add. Thank you. Well said.
Okay, Vice Mayor Henderson. No. Councilmember Zabriskie, anything additional?
I agree. Vice Mayor agrees.
Wonderful.
Right?
Okay. No motion on this, so we're just accepting our work plan, right?
Yes.
Okay. With that, we will move on to item 7.3, homegrown housing funding options analysis. Lynn, making her way to the hot seat.
Hello, Mayor and Council members. I am back to talk about homegrown housing more today. Today, I am going over the funding options analysis. So as a reminder, the Homegrown Housing Program incentivizes the creation of new housing for income-qualified local workers by offering a suite of incentives for the development of new deed-restricted housing units, and Council has directed staff to update and expand this program. However, program expansion would require identifying additional funding sources. Back in September, sorry, I have a pop-up here. Back in September, Council directed staff to work with BAE Urban Economics to develop a funding options analysis to help identify these sources. Tonight, we'll review the funding options analysis and receive initial council feedback on these options. In 2022, Council adopted an ambitious goal to deed restrict 10% of our housing stock by 2032, an estimated 1,500 units. And homegrown housing is one of the programs that works to achieve this goal. It targets units that are deed restricted for occupancy by households making up to 180% of area median income. It caps rents at a level that is affordable to households making 120% of area median income. The units must be studio, 1 bedroom, or 2 bedroom. The units must have at least one parking space. And in January of 2026, Council directed staff to make some changes to program qualifications, including expanding the boundaries to include projects located in the residential and non-residential VMT exemption zones, and to base the incentive payment on unit size and offer an increased incentive for units deed restricted at a lower AMI level. BAE Urban Economics completed a funding option analysis that explored 4 possible sources of locally controlled funding, including a supplemental real estate transfer tax, a transient occupancy tax increase, a short-term business license fee, and a sales and use tax increase. Each of these funding options would require approval by voters. In January, the town held an in-treat with Town Housing, Planning, and Engineering Division staff, developers, Councilmember Pallavi, and representatives from BAE Urban Economics and Sierra Business Council to give feedback on the proposed program changes, the valuation analysis, and a draft funding options report. This feedback led to further refinement of the reports. Participants also discussed other potential funding opportunities that were not part of the funding options report. The focus group discussion identified real estate transfer tax as potentially the most promising funding option. It provided the highest potential revenue generation of the options analyzed. It could be tiered to have a rate structure targeted at properties above a certain value to reduce potential impacts on the sale of properties that are more affordable to the local workforce. It would impact a smaller percentage of the local and visitor population than the other options, and it would be a one-time tax only implemented upon the sale of a property rather than an ongoing tax assessment that would have an impact on the already high local cost of living. So we're mostly going to focus on that one during my presentation. So a real estate transfer tax, the California Documentary Transfer Tax Act of 1967 authorizes jurisdictions to implement a tax on the privilege of transferring ownership or leasehold rights to real property, commonly known as a real estate transfer tax. And as a charter town, Truckee could raise additional real estate transfer tax if approved by voters. So under general law, real estate transfer tax is $1.10 per thousand of assessed value levied at the county level. It applies to residential and non-residential real property, and currently Truckee receives 55 cents per 1,000 of assessed value. So Truckee's real estate transfer tax revenues can fluctuate from year to year, ranging from a low of $342,337 in fiscal year 2023 to an estimated high of just under $450,000 in fiscal year 2025, and it represents just under 1% of total town general fund revenues. The town is budgeting $400,000 in real estate transfer tax revenues in fiscal year 2026. So revenue generation associated with a local real estate transfer tax above that authorized under general law is highly dependent on 3 factors: the applicable tax rates, the number and the pricing of sales or transfers that occur within the jurisdiction. On the next slide, I will show a table that reports the estimated revenue that may be generated through an increased local real estate transfer tax. So just keep in mind, for the following estimated revenue generation scenarios, it's assumed that it's structured as a flat rate per $1,000 value. The average transaction for a residential transfer is $1,080,154. A non-residential transaction of $449,464. The estimated annual gross sales value for residential is $686 million and non-residential is $39 million. So this table shows the additional property transfer tax revenues that would accrue to the town of Truckee for a given increase in the local real estate transfer tax level for residential and non-residential transactions. The add-on columns show the amount of new real estate transfer tax that would accrue to the town compared to the existing 55 cents per $1,000 in value. For example, if the local tax amount is increased from 55 per 1,000 to $1 per 1,000, or an additional 45 cents per 1,000 in value, the town would generate an additional $308,700 from residential transactions and $17,550 in new revenues from non-residential transaction. So in this scenario, the town would receive an estimated total of $725,000 in real estate transfer taxes, $398 $750 from the existing rate, plus $484,250 from the additional tax. And you can see how it scales all the way up to $15 per $1,000 in value. So this table shows the potential additional transfer tax amounts paid per transaction by tax rate for the residential transaction, again, based on that average transaction value of just over $1 million. Currently, the transfer tax paid to the town on the sale of this transaction is $594, which is 0.06% of the property's value. Again, if the real estate transfer tax were increased to $1 per thousand, the tax assessment for this transaction would go up to $1,080, which is 0.1% of the property's value, an additional $486 over the current assessment. So this is for one transaction, and this is important to look at because the additional real estate transfer tax is often paid by the buyer of the property, so that is an impact on home purchases, and so it's important to see what that actual number is on an individual transaction. So as a charter town, Truckee has the ability to raise additional real estate transfer taxes. We also explored the option of implementing a supplemental transfer tax on a regional scale. For example, if implemented by a regional entity like a joint powers authority or a regional housing finance authority. But since publication of the staff report, we have met with an expert in state tax law, and his opinion was that it would be significantly more complicated to try and implement a regional real estate transfer tax under a JPA or RHFA, and possibly difficult to impossible. So with that feedback, staff are not recommending pursuing a regional transfer tax currently at this time. Additionally, it's important to mention that the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is currently promoting a potential 2026 statewide ballot measure that would, if approved, cap the real estate transfer tax at $1.10 per $1,000 in valuation. Based on the town's most recent legislative updates, it's not clear that the proposed measure will garner sufficient support to become a ballot measure in 2026, although it could likely be reintroduced in 2028. Here are the other funding options that were analyzed by BAE and reviewed by staff in the focus group. We're not recommending further pursuing any of these funding options at this time. But just to go over them quickly, the transient occupancy tax, we're currently at 12%, and Measure K dedicates 2% of transient occupancy to housing already, and estimate that every additional 1% in transient occupancy tax would generate an additional about $630,000 in revenue. The analysis found, the burden associated with an increase in TOT is primarily on people visiting from outside the area, although local lodging businesses may be impacted to the extent an increase in the local TOT increases the combined cost of lodging in Truckee. Alternative business taxes were looked at as well. So looked at having a business license requirement for short-term rentals. Currently, there are no business license requirements in Truckee. There is an annual short-term rental renewal fee of $426 per property. So the tax base is assumed to be the existing 1,255 short-term rentals, and the potential revenue could range from just under $63,000 per year to just over $251,000 per year. The burden associated with a business license tax would fall to the business owners and operators. However, a business license tax could also encourage turnover of unused or infrequently used short-term rental permits by increasing the holder's carrying costs. Finally, sales and use tax. The current sales and use tax rate is 9%. We are authorized to levy additional local sales taxes if approved by voters. There is a cap on the combined value at 9.25%. Based on a taxable base of $483 million in local sales, each 0.25 increase in the local sales tax could potentially raise an additional $1.2 million in revenues each year, assuming that consumers do not respond by reducing consumption or shifting their purchases. Sales tax measures are generally considered regressive in that they lower, or that they proportionally impact lower income households to a greater extent than higher income households. So also going to go over some alternative funding options that came out of the Homegrown Housing Focus Group. The preferred option discussed by the focus group was to utilize strategies to encourage short-term rental permit optimization by either requiring or encouraging inactive permits to turn over. In 2024, the most recent year for which data is available, 222 registered short-term rentals reported zero in rental revenue. Strategies to ensure that all 1,255 permits are actively used could potentially result in some increases in TOT revenue that could be dedicated to housing. And at the January 29th, 2026 council retreat, council directed staff to add short-term rental permit optimization into the work plan for future council discussion and consideration. One option that was discussed but not further recommended at this point was to consider a small increase in the number of short-term rental permits from the existing cap of 1,255 and transient occupancy tax revenue collected from these additional short-term rentals could be dedicated to housing programs. So next steps for homegrown housing overall, not specifically the funding options, is Planning Commission will consider the proposed non-monetary incentives in February or later this month. Staff will present council with the proposed non-monetary incentives and first reading of the development code changes, likely in March. The second reading of the ordinance adopting a new development code chapter. Adoption of updated homegrown housing program guidelines in early spring and reference to the non-monetary incentives that have been adopted within the development code. And then, depending on council direction, staff will come back to council with a timeline and next steps regarding funding options, including work plan and budget implications in spring 2026. We request that council provide initial direction on feedback on council's interest in further exploring one or more of the long-term funding options analyzed by BAE and or the alternative funding options. So, does council agree with the prioritization of further analyzing the real estate transfer tax as the preferred long-term funding options? And if yes, the next steps would be continue to work with BAE Urban Economics on real estate transfer tax options and other revenue generation possibilities. We'd work with partners like Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency, Tahoe Housing Hub, and Sierra Business Council. And then another question, is council interested in forming a working group to help inform this process? That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions. And Aaron is here as well if you have any specific questions about the numbers.
Thank you so much, Lynn. So who would like to start off our discussion? Do we have any? Want to go ahead, Councilmember Pallavi?
I don't have a ton of questions because I've sort of been a part of all of this. And then just as a disclosure, I was also part of the phone call yesterday. I don't even know what day. Yeah, yesterday morning with the attorney who sort of dampened some of our outlooks on a few things, unfortunately, which brings us to tonight. I guess a question I have, maybe just more for staff, is could we broaden this last slide just a tad? And I don't know what that broadening is quite yet. I don't think any of us do. I think some of us are still thinking about our opportunities, but rather than just saying like, we're going to further this specific thing, we are going to further analyzing, long-term funding options. And this can certainly take up the majority of it, but keep our minds open to some other things without having to come back to council for like immediate side direction, I guess would be a question.
Yes, this item was agendized as is broad enough that you can certainly do that. We made these recommendations based off the in-retreat conversations and then the information we had at the time. But you're welcome to add, delete, change direction.
Yeah, I more just want to remain slightly more broad. This screams to me like we're just going to be really specific. So that's all I was going for on that question. And then I guess another question, and I'm pretty sure we don't have an answer for it, because if we did, I would probably have it as well with you guys. But I do think another bullet here, if we're going to proceed with this, and this is a question, I promise, is, what options do we have for cross-jurisdictional funding, and how do we get there? And if this is the working group to be asking those questions in, I know we have a few JPA meetings coming up with some partners, but I do think that, to me, has to be a big prong of this. So that's my question. Bad question. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to do a little bit more analysis in terms of what capacity, like Placer County has, for example, with sales tax, to know if that is an option or not. But other taxing mechanisms, or we have precedent with the library. They did a parcel tax. It's really setting up the financing district. The challenge with the real estate transfer tax is the county presumably does not have authority to do a real estate transfer tax. They would have authority to do other taxes, but this one is a bit unique.
And the county can't do it because they're not charter cities, basically. Only a charter city can do a real estate transfer tax.
That's right. The thing about being a charter city or a charter county is that in some ways we're not constrained by state law. Charter cities and counties have some ability to do their own thing. Regardless of what state law says. There are constraints on that, of course, but we happen to be a charter city. Nevada County is not a charter county, nor is Placer.
And when we look to our partners in Colorado, this has been one of the biggest funding mechanisms for housing programs in the Intermountain West, specifically in other resort communities. Are we... What are there? But they're more at like 1% of transaction costs. It's a different formula. Is that accurate? Does anybody have that? Sorry for the surprise question.
Surprise.
But
no,
sorry.
We can look that up for you. I don't have the answer off the top of my head. Different state, different rules.
For sure. Yeah. I know that we've looked at this in the past and looked at real estate transfer taxes before, and I think this is maybe this is just a little clip of it, but understanding the process that those communities went through to get those put in place, I think would be valuable if we do move this forward.
Yeah, one of the, and you know this, Councilmember, but one of the advantages I think the Intreat group really saw with this was that you could tier it so it wouldn't have an impact necessarily to, that you could tier it to higher value homes. There was a lot of advantages to this that other taxes may not have if that was the route the town would.
And maybe I'll just ask this question for the purposes of everybody hearing it. Can you maybe just explain the difference between this and a vacancy tax? And because we've talked about vacancy taxes before, how this would sort of work differently and not target necessarily a specific market segment?
Sure. I'll start, and then I see Hillary was reaching for her button, so she wants to add on. Typically, a vacancy tax would be an annual tax. There would be some way of determining if a home was vacant, and if it was vacant, then that property owner would pay the tax on an annual basis at whatever amount that would be. This would not be an annual tax. It would only be a tax upon the transfer of a property or the sale of a property, typically paid by the buyer. There's some negotiation options, it sounds like, between buyer and seller. You could tier this, and probably with a vacancy tax as well, to different valued homes. You could exclude deed restricted homes, assuming that the county could support that with their systems in place. This had more flexibility and was not an annual tax, which I think was the primary driver for preferring this.
Yeah, just adding to that a little bit, one of the challenges with considering a vacancy tax is it's relatively difficult to determine, or what is the vacancy rate you set it at? How do you determine whether a home is actually vacant that percentage of the year? There wasn't a very well-trod path forward to do those things, and this is would be a little bit easier to implement from a compliance perspective.
That's all my questions for now. I've been deep in this for past couple weeks, so pretty familiar.
Good question. And I will move on, but just kind of related to all of that, I have one question. We do have a movement for incorporating a portion of Placer County adjacent to us. That would be a charter city, I'm assuming?
Well, it would depend. If the incorporation effort goes, the voters would have to approve it being a charter city.
Okay. Yes, we're a few steps away, but that is on the horizon potentially. Okay, thank you. Do you have additional questions?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the questions on the regionalness, because I think that was potentially exciting about this, is looking at a regional mechanism. I did have some questions, and well, we got one public comment on what about ski leases and looking at potential around taxing on ski leases. I see Andy shaking his head. Go for it.
We lack the authority to do that. There's specific authority in the Revenue and Taxation Code to tax stays of 30 days or less, but there is no authority in state law anywhere that I'm aware of to tax stays longer than that. I don't think off the top of my head that that would fall within the scope of our charter city authority, but of course we could look at that. I'm not aware of any jurisdiction in the state that imposes taxes on stays of longer than 30 days.
Thank you. Also, I know this would be down the line, but was it contemplated that there would be a sunset to this once we've reached a certain point, or that would be determined as we have gone down this process further?
Yeah, we certainly didn't get into that level of detail or that conversation.
Great. Thanks. That's it for now.
Councilmember Zabriskie?
Yeah, I'm still interested in a joint powers authority in part because of the cross-jurisdictional commuters. We have people working in Placer County that live here and vice versa. And then also there's this idea that there could be a lot of money to be had out of the north end of Placer County on transfer taxes. So my question is, do we have a better sense of what the impediments are to the formation of a joint powers authority, why we're kind of being discouraged from going in that direction?
There are no impediments to forming a JPA, and there are no impediments to working together collaboratively among and between jurisdictions. The problem is that a JPA could not probably pass a real estate transfer tax.
Because of the county?
Because of the county. Because the county lacks, as you know, a joint powers authority has powers that are common to all of its members. And in this case, the power to do real estate transfer tax would not be common to all the members. It would be unique to the town.
Got it. Okay. And then one of the comments also was suggesting something along the lines of a $6,000 minimum contribution for STRs. Did staff look at that and have any comments on that idea that was thrown out?
Well, if it's intended that to operate an STR, you would simply have to pay $6,000 a year. That would be a tax, and that would require voter approval.
There isn't a. You can't just charge a. We did look at that. The answer is yes, we did look at that, but without having it be a taxing mechanism that needed voter approval, there was not a pathway.
Okay.
The town is limited to recovering its costs if you're going to regulate STRs. So we can impose regulatory fees that mirror our costs, but cannot go beyond cost recovery without voter approval.
Okay. Going back to when we started the STR program and put the cap on there of about, what was it you said, 1,225? Is that
1,255.
1,255. At that time, did we know how many of those new permits were inactive? Did we have any estimate, or are we able to go back at all and say when we first had data on inactivity?
We could certainly look back and see sort of what the level of activity was at that point. Just anecdotally, I know that when we were about to introduce the moratorium on new short-term rental permits, while we started working on that, we had a rush to the counter of folks interested in registering. So some of them just registered right at that point and had not had a history of being active up until that point. But I don't have the data at my fingertips, but we could do more research on that.
And I would add, I don't think we were measuring that. We weren't paying attention to that because it wasn't an issue at the time until we actually put in the permit plan. Up until then, it was like, sure, everybody got a permit.
We did have permits where we did have data on TOT collections, and that is how we would identify the inactivity rate. But I know we certainly did have some folks who had registered several years earlier and had, because we did not require an annual renewal at that point, we just had to register one time. So we did have some property owners who had registered 5 years earlier and were not currently using their permit.
I understand. And then my last question, and maybe this is for Andy again, is there a legal reason, a minimum charge? Have we already said a minimum charge is unlawful? Is that what you're trying to tell me? That would be considered a tax?
We can, I think I'm just repeating Andy here. No, we can charge cost recovery. So one of the things we did, so basically the staff time and effort that goes into doing the renewal, and that's the $426 annual renewal fee. We looked at an additional business license fee, and that was the $50 per year, $100 per year, $200 per year. But that again would still be a tax that would, require voter approval.
Unless what you're talking about is having a minimum threshold that every STR would have to generate in taxes every year, and telling them that if you don't hit the minimum, you lose your certificate. That is something that we could do.
Okay. And then, coming back to my last question is, could we limit the requirements based on the location within the town? Essentially allow more STRs within only a portion of the town, or does that run into legal issues?
That can be done. The town has very broad discretion to decide how to regulate STRs, dating back to a 1991 court case. There are some limits to that. South Lake Tahoe got in trouble when they were trying to say that there would essentially be very few limits if the properties were owned by local people, and there would be more limits if they were owned by non-local people. So we can't do anything like that, but the town can decide whether to have higher concentrations of STRs in some parts of Truckee.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you for this report. I think this is actually, I just applaud the innovation and creative thinking around this. This is really incredible. So just a couple quick questions. I know there's an estimate for the 635 additional units that we need, costing $55 million. And I know that staff put a response to a question about that in the questions and answers. I'm hoping you can just maybe clarify or give a bit more detail on the assumptions underlying that $55 million cost.
Let me pull out my spreadsheet.
Okay. I love spreadsheets, so you're in good company.
Yes. Well, Lynn is pulling that out. I'll say, it is a pretty rough estimate. There's a lot of, how many would be ADU potentials? How many would go through THAP? How many two-bedroom units? And now we have new incentive amounts that you're considering as well. So definitely a very rough estimate, but she and Hillary did the best they could to get to those just ballparks, so you kind of knew what you were striving for to achieve that goal.
Okay. And Lynn, maybe while you pull that up, I have another question that, Jen, maybe you're able to answer. And it's just, if we pursue the real estate transfer tax, how quickly or realistically do we think we could move to ballot, sort of given the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the urgency that could create for us? I guess how much of a risk do we perceive that to be if we decide to move forward?
I think our understanding right now through folks like Steve Frisch at SBC, who watches this very closely, and our advocates, is not looking like it's going to make a 26 ballot. I mean, we need to present that information to you so you have that and know that it's a possibility, but it's not looking all that likely at this point. I think the reality is, in terms of doing a proper community outreach process, engaging with stakeholders on this, a special election in 27 would be the most realistic.
Special election 27. Okay.
So again, these are very rough estimates, and this is based on 110,000 per unit deed restriction, which is about the average payment for THAP and our max under the old program. So for example, $51 million total cost is 304 deed restriction purchases, 133 ADU loans at $100,000 per loan, and 180 affordable units subsidized at $25,000 per unit. So that's one scenario that we looked at yeah, and then what else did I look at here? A higher, almost $68 million would be just 110,000 deed restriction purchases at 110,000. We can get down, I got down as low as 19 million by assuming a lot of, so 293 affordable units at 25,000, and then also 198 local requirements. So that means they were the workforce and inclusionary units. So it was a wide range. We looked at a bunch of scenarios. 55 million kind of seemed like that seems reasonable at using a few different purchase scenarios.
So sort of different scenario planning and also taking into consideration the BAE economic study and looking at scenarios there where developments weren't penciling.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds good. And then I just, Councilmember Pallavi, in response to your question about like what do other comparable towns do in the Mountain West, I did do a little bit of preliminary digging before we came in tonight because I was really curious about that. And so I just wanted to share, Telluride and Crested Butte both have a 3% real estate transfer tax. Avon is 2%, Aspen's about 1.5%, but they have two different tax structures there. Breckenridge and Vail are 1%. And then I also wanted to share, there are several different California charter cities, of course, that have enhanced real estate transfer taxes. Several of them are tiered. So Santa Monica, LA, Culver City, San Francisco, they're all tiered. I think San Francisco is the most tiered with 8 brackets. And it goes from 0.5% up to 6%. So I can share that table with you. And again, it's preliminary, but just for some numbers.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I don't have any additional questions. Fellow council members asked all of those. Do we have any others before we go to public comment? There's a lot of details, so appreciate everybody's research on all of that. Did you have some?
And
Yeah.
staff is fine with what Courtney reported. That's consistent with your understanding.
I can send it over too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's consistent with my understanding. That's why I was kind of teeing it up. I believe that they don't do it per the 1,000, though. They actually do it off the gross receipt, depending on which community they're in. That's why they've been able to raise so much more.
That makes sense since it's a percentage.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
percentage of the transaction versus per $1,000 value. Aaron might be able to answer our questions. We have an economist in the room who maybe has studied. That's up to you, Mayor, but you're welcome to.
So Aaron with BAE Urban Economics. So $1.10 per thousand of value, it kind of functions effectively the same way as if you applied a percentage. So you can calculate essentially a percentage equivalent. So the $10 per $1,000 of value, that's effectively a 1% rate.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and open this up to public comment. If you have a comment on this agenda item, please join us at the podium. You have 3 minutes, and at the conclusion, if you could please fill out one of the cards so we can document your public comment. Steve. Your mic is not on.
Sorry, there it is, green. For the record, Steve DeShera, purveyor of potentially useful information. I can tell you on behalf of the Eastern Placer Future hat that I wear that the proposed town of North Tahoe would not be a charter town. The reason for that is that our legal advisors have said when you put in your application, the process is challenging enough. Just be a general law city with 5 members of council elected at large and a town manager and a town attorney and go for it. So now in future, if we get to that point, and the council at that point in time wants to become a charter city, they could take that to the voters. But right now, we're off as a general law city. Learned council may have a different or have an understanding about various levels of charter status. I do know that Placer County is a charter county. And I think Councilmember Romack would verify that. As far as a real estate vacancy tax, having lived through no on end in the city of South Lake Tahoe, I could tell you don't go there. you're going to attract a lot of biting sharks, and I don't think it's worth it. Thank you.
Brian Helm with Paradigm 8. I submitted my comment earlier. I won't read you guys my comment. I think in general, as you guys know, we're supportive of town's efforts to catalyze the new affordable development. We appreciate that funding need is really substantial. And so one of the things I just tried to frame is like when you see 55 million, you're kind of like, goodness gracious, where does that all come from? I think Lynn could probably give you sort of a phasing sort of look at it, sort of be like, if these projects are coming to us in this level of frequency, and so we're really looking at trying to get $1 million a year or whatever that number is to make it seem less daunting, but also help frame some of the funding options that you have in front of you. Are they sort of keeping up with Lynn's sort of projected need on a 10-year schedule or something? And then I threw out a bunch of ideas that were sort of non-tax related because I'm not BAE. I don't claim to understand how they do what they do. So I was just sort of saying, certainly where you guys are at on optimizing TOT generation, I sort of gave the example of our 15 units we rent. It's almost 5 times the TOT generation that the average unit is. And so if there's some way to navigate the regulation to find some set of optimized things you could direct towards housing, it could be very, very, very powerful. Get it, there are a lot of legal questions there. And then the other one was just sort of a non-funding one, which is, as we're waiting for funding to catch up, can you, someone like Edmonds Loft or future projects that we would do, if the funding wasn't there, bank our deed restriction credits that weren't required through mitigation or paid for by the credit program, and then sell on an open market to developers that are coming forward with market rate and needed it. So we didn't require funding, but we could proceed with a project in advance of that. And the good news about that is you're delivering the housing in advance of the mitigation need of the future market rate project. So anyways, I just encourage you as you look at these tax related ones to also sort of keep the options open to look at some of these other ones because it is a big number to go get. So thank you for all the support staff's given to this.
I have one clarification. I'm so sorry. In response to Mr. Teixeira, Placer is a charter county, but its charter does not allow anything unique for taxes. It's governed by general state law about taxes. Therefore, it still can't do a real estate transfer tax.
Thank you for that clarity. I was slightly confused by that as well. Other public comment on this issue? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back to council for deliberation. Who would like to start us off?
I'll you on.
Okay.
Might be just easiest. If anybody else wants to, I definitely don't care. It's all good. Nobody's looking at me, so it sounds like it's my turn. And I have actually just a quick question, Andy. Can to Brian's question, because I think we've sort of been dancing around this one a tiny bit, but if there was a set number of permits or a defined subset of short-term rental permits, could transit occupancy tax collected from said permits could be directed by council outside of a ballot measure, could be directed at a budget level, to be quite fair, right?
So
Yes,
the answer is
right.
yes. And what you're getting at is a designation like you've done in the
designation,
past. We wouldn't
precisely.
necessarily say permits 1 through 10 because we're not going to track it that way, but you could say 10% of those revenues are going to go.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear that that would be more under the designation, which is just a squishy way of us putting money in different funds.
Correct.
Yes, wonderful. Any other questions from anybody before I keep going? No, you're good. Okay. So I'm going to start by saying one of the fascinating one of the fascinating responses that the attorney on this phone call on Monday morning had for us when we asked him very point blankly and said, hey, has anybody else used their JPA or cross-jurisdictional funding to do anything like this before? And the attorney goes, absolutely not. You guys can be the first and you can tell us all how it goes. And we're going to bring it to the legislature. And if nobody sues you, then you're good. That's basically how we started the conversation. So that's basically what he said, right? Yeah. So that was unfortunate news. But what it did highlight, at least for me, as we continue, whether it was Chris's presentation, whether it's any of this other stuff that we keep doing, it tends to be fairly unique, and it tends to be addressing our really specific issues in the most direct way that we think we can find solutions to that. And that's what's sort of really exciting about all the work that we have been doing up here, especially in this sector. So that's why in my first question, I said, can we just leave this a little bit more broad? I think I agree with the prioritization that we do need to move this forward. I agree with a lot of Brian's comments and comments that we've made internally to say we're not looking for 55 million over 5 years. You know, I think realistically, while we're saying, you know, we want 10% by 2032, I think in the real world, you know, 10 to 20 years is probably a much more realistic goal in terms of actual execution. When we start to take 55 million and divide it a little bit over a longer term, specifically a real estate transfer tax, and not even at the highest level, starts to look quite appealing. And at least in my opinion, doesn't put us in the same boats as some of our sales taxes, property taxes, etc. It affects you once. If it happens at a transaction, and luckily in our extremely fortunate community, you know, we've homeowners, property owners have been extremely fortunate to see increasing property values, and so taking a tiny chip of that to go back directly into our property market and improve neighboring properties, restrict neighboring properties to keep our workforce here, to keep our community going. To me, the nexus is really important. It's important, at least for me, to vote to put something on a ballot or to be part of another taxing mechanism, that we have really, really, really clear connections as to why we're doing it, what we're doing, and not only who it's going to affect, but who it's also going to assist and help. And to me, it sort of checks, this mechanism checks those boxes for that initial litmus test that I've been putting different tax measures through. I personally am not ready to give up on cross-jurisdictional funding opportunities. I think that has to be part of the tools in our toolbox moving forward. I know we've articulated that, and I know we all want to continue working on that. So that's just something I want to keep on the table and understand the implications that the JPA or a different structure like that Regional Finance Housing Authority, which without going into the specific details on, is both exciting and really confusing and really complex. And maybe that's something we talk about in a future work plan update that I might throw out there, but not tonight. I'm just giving you all a heads up that it might be coming. And yeah, I do think we need to form a bit of a working group, and I do think we just need a little bit more time to make sure the right partners are at the table. This is the right funding option moving forward, but I'm reasonably assured that maybe it is. I don't know. That's all I got.
Thank you, Councilmember Pallavi. Do you want to go ahead, Councilmember
Sure,
Romack?
I'll jump in. Appreciate your comments, Councilmember Pallavi, and the work that you've been doing along with Aaron and others. I think, again, as I said in my comments, was hoping for a potential regional option. The Placer County Board of Supervisors last week talked about approving projects utilizing transient occupancy tax funds. And as part of their conversation, they too were talking about opportunities for a more regional funding framework and policy. And I know that's been part of the conversation that's been highlighted through the JPA framework. So I think I'm in alignment with you, Councilmember Pallavi, is I'm comfortable saying at this time, real estate transfer tax seems like the preferred option. But I like that staff said continue to work on that and other revenue generation possibilities, because I also don't want to pigeonhole ourselves where we're saying this is the only thing, and coming from other work and other regional conversations, we find there's other opportunities. So I think the second bullet on this slide, again, to continue working with our partners is really important. To continue to see what works. I know Sierra Business Council and Steve Frisch, and understanding what's happening at the state level, and are there mechanisms where we push in some way and we could be a leader in trying something new. So yeah, continue to move forward on that. I would support a working group. I think this does seem like something that is going to take some time and attention. And then, I will just say, I know this STR optimization conversation came up at our retreat. I do have some concerns around them, and based around why we started the STR ordinance and why certain mechanisms are in place. So, at this time, I don't see that as being the best next option either. I know there's still a lot of data to be gathered. But again, just some concerns over what the unintended consequences would be if we just are starting to make all 222 start renting more frequently. So I did just want to put that out there as well. Again, not saying no, but saying we need more information before moving down that path as well. So those are my comments at this time.
Thank you. Councilmember Zabriskie.
I agree with both Councilmember Romack and Pallavi. The thing is that everything I've seen so far up to now really favors the transfer tax. So yes, I'm inclined to give it a priority. There seem to be a lot more problems with all the alternatives that have been put forward to us so far. And I agree with Councilmember Romack on the STR prioritization and inactive STRs. I really don't know what to do with that. I've read pros and cons on that. I suspect that's the way we started in a way, even with the people who applied for STR permits. We've been going along with this large segment of homeowners with the permits that aren't renting. And so it probably would mean an increase in what's actually occurring on the ground if we did something to promote the further use of STRs. And but on the other hand, there they are, permits. The idea is you are going to STR them, and if you're not, you should give them to someone who's on the waiting list that does want to rent out. So I'm sympathetic to both sides, and I guess that's why I say keep it within the scope of the further work that's going to be done, and come back with something that's easy for me to approve.
Just make it easy.
Yes, just make it easy.
Thank you, Councilmember Zabriskie. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I guess I'll first start by speaking just to sort of the long-term funding question, and then I do want to talk about the near-term opportunity around what we're sort of terming STR optimization, especially because we also talked about that at the strategic retreat, and there were 3 council members who wanted to move forward with that. So I'm going to start with funding. I'm supportive of staff moving forward with a deeper analysis of the real estate transfer tax. We've set a really ambitious goal, 1,500 deed restricted units by 2032. And we've made some incredible progress towards that goal. But we have over 600 units to go. We know that there's a really large funding gap to close, approximately 55 million, depending on sort of what scenario that we're using. And so we obviously need a funding source that can scale to that challenge. Of the 4 options that BAE analyzed, and again, thank you for that analysis, it seems like the real estate transfer tax stands out for several reasons. It generates the most revenue. It's a one-time cost at the point of sale. It's not an ongoing hit to our residents' already high cost of living. And to me, critically, it can be tiered. So we can set higher rates on luxury and second home transactions while protecting working families purchasing at lower price points. To me, that's not just good policy, it's the right equity framework for a community where vacation home demand is one of the very things driving out our workforce. I mentioned earlier about how many of our comparable mountain resort communities in Colorado have been doing this for decades, so this wouldn't be proposing anything radical, simply catching up to what our peer communities have already figured out. And in California, several different charter cities are already doing this, specifically with tiered structures designed to shield lower value transactions for workforce buyers. So to me, it's a proven voter approved model in our state. I realize a regional approach may not be viable at this moment, but of course our workforce doesn't stop at our town boundary, and a regional approach would broaden the tax base, it would share the political lift, it would align funding with how our housing market actually functions. That said, I don't want to be stuck for a year or 2 years or 3 years waiting for a JPA or something similar to pull together. I'd be supportive of, we're moving forward in Truckee as we can, and on a parallel path, we will continue these conversations for a regional approach, but I don't want it to slow our movement either. And then just on to the near term, and I should say, and so yes, also supportive of a working group. Onto the near term, while we, if we end up deciding to move forward with the real estate transfer tax and moving forward on that, I do believe we have revenue sitting on the table today. Of our 1,255 capped STR permits, 222 reported zero revenue last year, and 47 of those for 2 consecutive years. With the average STR generating $36,000 in annual TOT, that's nearly $1 million that we're not collecting, while 260 plus people sit on a wait list who want to participate in that program. To me, this isn't about forcing anyone to rent. Property owners retain that choice. But holding a scarce public resource, the STR permit, comes with a responsibility to use it for its intended purpose or make room for someone who will. 222 unused permits undermines that program's legitimacy. When a fifth of our permits are generating zero activity, it signals that the permit program isn't working as designed. And we always reevaluate our programs. We have embraced a continuous improvement mindset. If we're saying we're only going to do it for certain programs, but not this one, then that raises some real concern for me. If the program isn't working as designed because a fifth of the permits aren't generating any activity, it makes me ask things like, and I brought this up at the retreat, why have a cap at all if permits aren't being used? Why maintain a wait list if current holders can't participate? Why regulate an industry that isn't actually operating as intended? Good governance requires accountability. So if we're going to regulate STRs, if we're going to inspect them, track them, manage complaints, maintain a list, then the permits need to serve their purpose. I hear some of our public commenters who wrote in advance of the meeting, and I share the goal of a community where housing serves residents first. And that's exactly why I can't accept 222 permits generating zero revenue. Those aren't serving visitors or residents. Optimization means either permits produce revenue that funds workforce housing, or they go back in the pool, and if no one claims them, the effective cap shrinks on its own. So either outcome moves us toward the community described in those public comments. STR optimization is not pro-STR, it's pro-housing. There's a really big difference there. Every dollar of TOT that we generate from underperforming permits is a dollar that can go towards homegrown housing. That over time, that reduces our community's dependence on STRs as a housing model. I want our workforce housed. Staff has direction from that January retreat to bring STR optimization forward. I would ask that we affirm that tonight as a near-term priority. Doesn't require voter approval. It can generate meaningful interim revenue for homegrown housing, and it strengthens the integrity of a program our community really depends on, a program to house our local workforce, which this community has said time and time and time again they want. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I do want to go ahead and continue work with BAE Economics and develop a working group as outlined here. But I would like to affirm two things, and I'll come back to our goals in a minute. But I do want to just speak to the STR program because it is peripherally part of this agenda item. And it's so interesting. I agree with what you said there, Vice Mayor Henderson, in terms of putting that money back into the community. But I do want to just be clear, at least with my fellow council member that was there at the time, I don't think the intention or that STR program was not designed in order to make sure the permits were optimized or utilized. It was just designed to make sure that we had a cap. We were just trying to mitigate the impacts that our community was experiencing due to the STR, due to a lack of regulation on STR. So I agree. We are also always interested in constant improvement and evaluation. And if we need to do that on this, then so be it. But I want to just be clear that that was not part of what we were designing as this ordinance was developed. I do think it's a personal property right for somebody to pay for a permit annually and not use it if that's what they choose to do. You're right, it is impacting our ability to raise funds that we typically dedicate and designate for housing. However, I'm very proud of this council's record of not voting specifically for things that generate revenue for the town. We traditionally vote or support things that are in the interest of our community and for the benefit of our community. So with that, and we talked about this as we have already stated at our retreat. I am not supportive of spending staff time to reinvent our STR program. I understand that we have 3 council members that are interested in doing so, and we will hear that issue as it comes back. But I do want to just be clear on my interest there or lack thereof, as the case may be. I do want to quickly go back and check in with my fellow council members on our actual goal, because our prior stated goal is to have these 10% by 2032. And that $55 million in 6 years is a very different reach than trying to do that over a longer period of time. I've heard some of my council members talk about maybe this is a 10-year goal. Can I get a feedback from my fellow council members? Are we still really focused on trying to accomplish this 10% in 6 years? Because that really does change what the funding structure is that we're trying to achieve here. So coming down the line, Councilmember Pallavi, are you on a 6-year program or a 10-year program?
I think this is a question of a vision versus realistic execution. And I would just hearken us back to the net zero policies, right? When we were trying to go with zero greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera. I equate it to that. I think 2030 aspirational goal is 6 years. Realistic goal is, at least in my opinion, minimum 10 years, just based on our pace of development and, kind of what we
And
see.
the fact that we're not directing that development, we're just supporting.
Precisely, right? Like we're not the private sector. And with that said, I think there could be ups, downs, lefts, and rights. But most importantly, what we don't know is what economic conditions will be brought upon us within that 10-year or 6-year horizon. And the opportunities where if conditions lined up and all of a sudden borrowing money was cheap again and financing was flowing and there were different opportunities, it might make more sense to have more money up front and leverage certain things faster versus slower. So all I'm saying is I agree with you. The horizon and the dollar levels could be significantly different. I think the bigger picture, though, is on some of those other, the problem to me is on the other funding mechanisms, we've basically hit our limits. So I don't see them as realistic. I think it was a good exercise to see how much they would raise. The problem is we're already at our limits on a lot of them, right? So I hear what you're trying to get at, and I agree with you. And, sitting here today, I might say, 10 years is realistic, but then we would get rid of our aspirations, and nobody wants to do that. So I would say leave the aspirations, but always have the realistic execution in the back of our heads.
And I hear what you're saying in that because none of us have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But having that money available in case there were the perfect opportunity, there's some real benefit there.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see that, and we do have some big projects coming down the pike. We've been dealing with some 10 and 12 unit projects as well, but if we see a 50 or 60 unit project, and there are a few of those in the pipeline, it would be really interesting to see what kind of difference this money could make at scale, faster and larger. So I don't want to limit us in that sense. Sorry, that was a really long answer to your question.
That was, but thank you. Councilmember Romack, you got a shorter answer for us?
I mean, along the same lines, I think visionary, it'd be great to hit it. There's so many things we don't control. I mean, maybe interest rates go down and we could have a ton more people want to jump in and buy homes through TAP, but we have no idea where that's going to happen. So, maybe realistically it's a little longer. And you brought up the net zero. We changed that policy, didn't we, recently, acknowledging we might not reach the original goal, but still knowing we're pushing for it. So I would say at this time, continue to have that 2032 as our goal while we're still exploring these funding options. Like today, I'm not ready to say yay or nay for sure on anything, but kind of seeing what's available, knowing maybe then we push that out a little bit and our goal becomes 10% by 2036 instead, once we have an understanding of what's coming in, what are the economics and all that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zabriskie.
I guess I'm not looking at it that sharply going out 5 or 6 years, going out to 55 million. I feel like we have to be really nimble and look at all the opportunities that present themselves and be ready to shift to address them, including many non-monetary ways of building the housing. We have to be sensitive to that. How can we rezone in order to make housing more affordable, make the cost of development more affordable? In terms of just budgeting, when your question's sort of a budgeting question, how much are we going to budget over the next 6 years?
It's the difference between trying to raise 5 million versus 9 million a year, right?
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, the budget goes year by year. We're going to switch to a 2-year budget, and I see looking at this upcoming budget period, the big question is how much are we going to try to allocate out of the upcoming budget? And we'll be talking about future years, but we're not going to make a commitment or be able to bind future councils on how much is going to be put into this program over the future years.
Oh, you're just going to throw another little variable in there for us, aren't you? Thank you.
The big point, I guess, of my response is we need to focus on this upcoming budget and put a lot of effort into alternative ways of producing housing. I think in part of the rail yard, building out the rail yard, getting these projects that have already been approved built. I feel like we could be doing more there. But that's just an example of how I think we have to look at all the options and not just be overly focused on funding for
Thank you.
homegrown housing.
Vice Mayor.
Well, if anyone ever taught me to reach for the stars and stretch my goals, it was you. So I would say we have big, lofty goals, and I want us to keep stretching for them. And I think that's why I've been really advocating a lot around we need to do more around housing. It's yes and to me. It's yes, we need the funding and the financing, and we have an opportunity in front of us with STR optimization. We may have a long-term opportunity with the real estate tax. It's yes, and we need to look at our fee structure and how we actually take fees from developers to get new homes constructed. It's yes, and we need to look at zoning. It's not one or the other, but obviously they all play and interact together. I think they're all critical, and it's incumbent upon us to make some of those really, really hard decisions so that we can actually get housing for our workforce, both through existing housing, through deed-restricted housing, through new construction, through all of the different pathways and options that we have.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I did want to make that point as well, that I really struggle with the idea that we have to build our way out of our housing issues. We have plenty of housing. It just mostly sits empty. But we have programs that are strategically focused on unlocking those units, like our lease to locals and rooted renter programs, which we support robustly, and I think we will continue to do so, especially in this upcoming budget. Okay, well, I think this is, again, as we talked about at the retreat, probably one of the biggest and most impactful decisions that we will be making this year is how we move this forward, how aggressive, how much we want to reach. So I am supportive in trying to keep on that goal of 2032. And so that means we're being more aggressive with probably not just looking at the transfer tax, but also some of the other concepts that have been brought before us. And as Councilmember Pallavi said, that we want to keep it rather broad. Did you have something else?
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing. If we're gonna, before we move off of this agenda item, I think we want to talk about the working group briefly, and kind of who we want on that working group, and or just give staff some feedback here. To me, and maybe this is a question for staff and for all of us, do we want a working group that's going to, primarily focus on things within the town of Truckee that are significantly more under our control, that we can actually affect change with, to Vice Mayor Henderson's comments, you get too many partners, this thing goes and takes on a life of its own. And in parallel, continue conversations with our regional partners. So that would be my recommendation, is the working group that we talk about tonight is much more Truckee focused. It blossoms out of our in-treat group, I think, with a bunch of other stakeholders like realtors, among others. And in parallel, we continue the JPA work, the cross-jurisdictional work that sort of continues to converse, but isn't necessarily the overall goal. And that's mostly from a timing perspective. I just think we work much more efficiently within our own border, for what lack of a better word. And then also with that said, so I would be fine with like sort of staff working through like who's on this working group. It is not going to be Brown Act, but we can still have 2 council members at the minimum. I do think Councilmember Henderson and I are both interested. I'm not going to speak for you. You can speak for yourself, obviously, but
You're
I think
right, though. Good instinct.
2 council members also be a part of that, I think would be good for the short term as well. Just to maintain sort of that continuity of 2 different terms also, however that manifests itself too.
Thank you for that detail, and that is kind of where I was assuming the direction we would be going as well, given the limitations that we see in our regional approach, as much as we all still want to reach for that. It looks like you're okay. Councilmember Zabriskie, anything to add to that?
Yes, and I agree with the bird in the hand approach reflected in what Vice Mayor said and Councilmember Pallavi said. All the more reason to have those 2 be on the working group.
And Vice Mayor Henderson, have you volunteered yourself for this working group?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Okay, one last little clarification on this. We did have 3 council members interested in staff time to optimize short-term rentals of existing permits. We did not at that time, as far as I recall, talk about adding permits. I do not believe that was the direction given, and I just want to get that clarity from council. Okay. Great. Just wanted to affirm that. Thank you very much. Anything else before we close this item and take a short break? Staff, do you have the direction you need, or is there anything we need to clarify for you?
I do.
Okay.
Great.
We all want to jump in and talk. I think we have enough direction, and just to be clear, the entry kind of extension of this is still the like staff directed. It's not the an officially appointed group. It's more of the voluntary, voluntary group.
Coalition of the willing.
The coalition of the willing.
Yes.
That's perfect.
For the time being, until we figure out the direction that comes out of
It's
wherever
very
we go
informal,
next.
I guess,
Yes.
is the point. Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, with that, we will take a short break. We'll come back at 7:25. will bring this meeting back to order, and we are going to move on to item 7.4. Approve the Visit Truckee Tahoe's annual report and adopt resolution 2026-03 to address the Tourism Business Improvement District assessment rate. And Carissa, you're going to go for this one.
I am. Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm Carissa Binkley, Economic Vitality Program Analyst. And this item, as you stated, is the annual review for Visit Truckee Tahoe's work under the Truckee Tourism Business Improvement District, or TBID, along with a request to adjust the assessment rate as authorized in the adopted management district plan. And tonight, there are two actions for council consideration. First is approval of the annual report required annually under state law. And second is adoption of the resolution to adjust the TBID adjust the TBID assessment rate from 1.25, which it currently sits at, to 2%. And as a brief refresher, the TBID is a self-assessment on short-term lodging that was established in 2015 and renewed after a robust public process in 2025 for a 10-year term through 2035. The assessment is collected alongside TOT and remitted to Visit Truckee Tahoe, and its use is legally restricted to activities that provide a specific benefit to the assessed lodging businesses. And unlike TOT, transient occupancy tax, these funds do not go to the town's general fund. And while Visit Truckee Tahoe administers the TBID day-to-day, council retains a defined oversight role. This includes approving formation and renewal, conducting an annual review of activities and finances through the annual report, and approving any assessment rate adjustments within the range already authorized in the management district plan. And tonight's recommended actions fall squarely within that oversight role. The annual report summarizes Visit Truckee Tahoe's work over the past year. And as a reminder, VTT made a presentation to Town Council in January reviewing the themes of their report. And key themes included a continued shift towards destination management aligned with community values, a focus on shoulder season and midweek visitation, expanded use of data to inform marketing and visitor communication, and increased investment in stewardship and visitor education in coordination with partners. The report also reflects the broader operating context. Following post-pandemic peak, lodging demand has stabilized and revenues have normalized, while competition among peer mountain destinations has intensified. At the same time, Visit Truckee Tahoe completed a leadership transition in 2025, with Jackie Calvert stepping into the executive director role after Colleen Dalton's retirement. And as part of this year's annual report, Visit Truckee Tahoe is requesting approval to adjust the TBID assessment rate, as I previously said, from 1.25% to 2%. And this request is within the authorized range of 0.75 to 2% that the TBID payers and council approved during the 2025 renewal process. And for context, the assessment rate was originally set at 2% from 2015 through 2020 and was voluntarily reduced during the pandemic period. And it's important to clarify that while this adjustment would and would not do. If approved by Town Council, the adjustment would increase capacity for destination management, visitor communication, and stewardship activities that are already authorized under the adopted management district plan. The assessment would be paid entirely by overnight visitors through lodging charges, would not impact the town's general fund or transient occupancy tax rate at all. The adjustment would not require new petitions, and the flexibility to adjust the assessment rate within the authorized range was included in the materials provided to all the lodging businesses during the 2025 TBID renewal process, which was supported by a majority petition and approved by Town Council. And the adjustment would not change the town's short-term rental cap. During its annual presentation, Visit Truckee Tahoe also requested that town consider short-term rental optimization as a future work plan item. I realize this was discussed during the last agenda item. The concept focuses on better utilization of existing STR permits, as hundreds of permits are held and unused each year. As council discussed at the January retreat, this item has already been added to the work plan and will continue during the third quarter work plan update, and no action is required on this topic tonight. As of about 2 p.m. today, 25 public comments were received. I will share that an email was sent out by town staff to all the TBID payers informing them of the agenda item, and there were lots of thoughtful comments from their community partners, property managers, hoteliers, as well as independent hosts and residents. And based on the information provided, staff recommend that council approve the Visit Truckee Tahoe annual report and adopt Resolution 2026-03, adjusting the TBID assessment rate to 2%, And if approved, staff recommend that the new rate take effect July 1, 2026 to align with the town's fiscal year and allow adequate notice to the TBID payers. And with that, Jackie from VTT has a brief statement, and then we are both available for any questions.
Thanks, Carissa. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Jackie Calvert with Visit Truckee, Tahoe. Great to see everyone again. I just wanted to share a little statement here. And, you know, I've spent pretty much all of my career working in the ski industry. And if that experience taught me anything, it's that visitation is never a guarantee. And we are a destination that is, unfortunately or fortunately, heavily reliant on something that's completely out of our control, and that is weather. In those lean years, or those lean snow years, or during economic shifts, I can attest that I had to work twice as hard, because finding the right visitor when conditions are challenging isn't a matter of luck. It requires data-driven targeting and a high level of strategic intentionality, both of which require real investment. We're already seeing how signs of fragile destination-dependent businesses can be. Long-standing lakeside restaurants have closed, and others are expanding into Reno because they need more consistent year-round demand. If we don't proactively show and tell our visitors why Truckee is still the place to be, they go elsewhere. And when they do, the $245 million in visitor spending and $7.5 million in TOT that paves our roads and plows our snow begins to stall. We hear the concerns about rising costs because we live here too. But the greatest cost to Truckee would be a failure to protect this economic engine. In 2024, visitors paid taxes saved every local household over $2,000. And right now, VTT is working with 40% less program capacity than we had in 22-23. We're trying to fight for our market share and manage the impacts of tourism with one hand tied behind our back. And when you look at the restoration and what it actually brings to Truckee, it really kind of boils down to three things. First, it buys us precision. We don't need more people on a Saturday in July. We need the right people, those who stay midweek, shop local, and respect our mountain values. Restoration allows us to protect our rate integrity by targeting visitors who value what Truckee offers rather than competing on price alone. Second, it acknowledges the reality of our economy. VTT is not immune to the rising costs of doing business. Our operating costs have climbed while our funding has been reduced. We are currently trying to manage a world-class destination on a fraction of the budget. Our peer competitors average $3.8 million annually. And finally, it allows us to return to active stewardship. I think a lot of our community and this council knows us for our $1.4 million in stewardship contributions, but that level of investment requires a management capacity we simply do not have at 1.25%. We want to be back at the table as a partner, solving our community's challenges, but we need the resources to actually move the needle. So we aren't looking to expand. We are looking to restore our ability to be a positive partner to this town. We are asking for the tools to keep Truckee's economy resilient, snow or shine. Thank you. And I'm here for questions.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, stay close by. Questions for staff or Jackie? Councilmember Zabriskie, would you like to start?
Sure. I'll try this on you, Carissa. What do we understand to be the perceived negative effects of tourism? I mean, I hear there's too many people in towns. This phrase thrown out often, and so we know there's increased traffic. But beyond that, what's perceived to be the negative effect, and are there particular areas like Donner Lake or the trails where we're seeing, I don't know, increased traffic, uncivil behavior?
I'll invite Jackie to add to what I can share. Based on public comment and some conversations I've had during this process of talking through what was going to be in front of you tonight, and as noted in the last bullet here, affordability of certain homeowners, they feel like this is just going to add another piece. You know, it is a conversation of that this is paid by the people coming to visit. some of the perception is just the housing price impacts. They feel like adding this, even if you have an STR permit, this is another cost to running their business, essentially, if they're independent or an STR. And there are some people who feel like this is an opportunity for the town to increase COT instead of TBID. Those are just some of the comments that we saw tonight.
Are you hearing of any environmental impacts or recreational
I didn't hear that
impacts?
this round. I know, some of the offhand conversations we've had were COVID was the peak of something that was unsustainable for our community on many levels. And at that point, we know that there were environmental impacts, but I've not heard that during this time. And I don't know if Jackie has anything to share around that.
We don't track the environmental impacts necessarily. I think there's some good organizations out there who might have some good data that maybe we could look at. But I think from the resident sentiment survey, I did share this in our presentation a couple weeks ago, is, I think our community does realize the benefits of tourism. 87% do see the economic benefit, and not necessity, but it's how our local businesses thrive. Even I always say the dentist, kind of relies on our community being here, and a lot of them are tourism reliant workforce. So, but we also really recognize that our community is burdened during those peak times, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with all of our efforts, is look at how can we support our community when they need it the most during those slower periods, fall, spring. Like I said, we're never going to try to get more people here on a Saturday in July. That's just not our objective. It's really trying to mitigate those impacts during those peak periods.
Okay. You, in the answers to questions, there was a response that included reference to things VTT's already done to reduce traffic, like encouraging visits by Amtrak and the use of our public forms of transportation. What are there plans? Are there future plans if we increase this TBID TOT to 2%? Do you have specific plans for how to continue these efforts on destination stewardship?
Yeah, I think so. For the car-free travel, that's certainly something that we're constantly looking at. And at the moment, as I kind of shared in my answers, it's really been more so about content strategy and marketing strategy on that. And again, if we were to restore it to 2%, we would really look at supporting B-Cycle. I think it's a great program. Our hotels love that service. But it lacks the funding, right? So I think that's something that we would seriously consider looking at if we were to restore. In addition, we're meeting with TNT, TMA tomorrow. They haven't officially asked, but I know that they're looking to figure out how to better subsidize the Reno Tahoe airport shuttle to get folks up here from the airport to our region. Again, that's a great program that we would love to support, but at our current levels, we just don't have the funds to do that. So I guess a long-winded way of answering, the most meaningful impact in our funding would go towards stewardship. That's what's been impacted the most because of this limitation in our funds. So that's our prioritization.
Okay.
Certainly moving forward.
And when you get more specific under that prioritization, have you looked at particular projects, whether it's getting back involved in helping with the inspections for aquatic invasive species, which apparently is becoming a bigger issue down on Lake Tahoe anyway, and I'm assuming those would tend to be out-of-town people and therefore visitors? Is there?
Yeah, so we work with the Lake Tahoe Destination Stewardship Council, and that is a very active topic that our council discusses. It's primarily supported through Keep Tahoe Blue, the league, but we are all active partners in trying to figure out how to grow awareness on that program. They buy the billboards down in Reno or in Sacramento to encourage people to take care of that. So, yes, we...
And then I see that destination stewardship is a theme, described as a theme for the future. And you mentioned just now increasing midweek and off-peak tourism. But I don't see that as an actual commitment anywhere. I see it more as just wanting the capacity. VTT would like to have the capacity to do these things without really committing. And then in the management plan from last year, it only talks about year-round, increasing tourism year-round, and there's nothing about focusing on midweek or off-peak tourism increase. It makes it sound like just want increased tourism across the board. So are there any thoughts about amending the district plan to make it consistent with the annual report? And any thoughts about making a commitment rather than just saying that VTT would like to have the capacity to do destination stewardship?
I hear what you're saying, and I think we could potentially look at figuring out how to work that into the management district plan. But I think so that's sort of the all-encompassing umbrella, right? But when we get down to brass tacks of really what we're doing and what we're doing each year and how we're allocating dollars, that is kind of done at the strategic level of the organization, and it varies from year to year, right? So it's hard to say to put specific percentages around particular budget items, but I will say within the MDP, we also have restrictions on that. We can only go up and down. I think it's like 5 to 10% in each category. So that really, we are restricted in a sense of like how, Carissa used a really great example today of like, if we wanted to, I don't know, buy ponies for everyone in Truckee, that's just not a part of what we can do. We have.
Yeah. I would love to just add a tad bit of color to that, that I think maybe we're missing in that. So the level of granularity that you're asking for, Councilmember Zabriskie, is wonderful, but is sort of, the MDP is a 10-year framework, right? So it's meant to encompass a broad variety of things. What I think maybe we've neglected to address is VTT is run by a group of assessed business folks, right? And they're the ones, other than myself, sitting up here representing the community, they're the ones, and we as a board are driving that strategic vision on an annual basis. And simply out of interest of the assessed payors into the organization, they're mostly at capacity during those times, right? So it's of the at the insistence of the board that we're not trying to, there's no more capacity during those heightened times, right? So it's in the organization's best interest from a ratepayer's perspective to be focused on times where they're not already achieving their highest ADRs, average daily rates. They're not already achieving full sellouts of their properties, and that's what drives that more direct strategy. So while it's not an overt commitment, it's simply a reflection of reality at the end of the day. And maybe through public comment, one of you property owners could be more articulate with that.
Yeah, and then that kind of brings up a point talking about already being at capacity. I'm also hearing from earlier agenda item, we have about 225 STR properties that aren't being rented out at all, which makes it sound like there is additional capacity at the peak times. So I'm kind of wrestling with that and realizing we have people
demand
in the
and
community
capacity are different, I think. Don't confuse demand with capacity.
Yeah, so
right.
Capacity.
So the capacity, sure, it may or may not exist, but those people aren't necessarily putting their properties up for rent. That's, I think, the piece that you're missing, right? So yes, there's 225 properties who are being shown as non-collectors, but if their property isn't for rent during a given time, then that supply doesn't exist, right? So they're not exactly apples to apples, I think.
I'm trying to ask questions over here, but we did hear there were 3 council members who are interested in exploring STR optimizations. So
yeah, I was just trying to help you along.
Thank you.
I'll stop. Jackie can continue.
Okay, so there isn't really a pro forma for how money would be spent if we increased the T-bid TOT to 2%.
We discuss that during our budgeting process, which typically happens, around April or May. The board kind of looks at our priorities and our strategic plan to then look at that. But again, while maybe I'm not necessarily committing certain specific dollars, I really can commit to a meaningful amount of dollars would go towards that stewardship because that was the most impacted pillar of our strategic plan that was impacted due to this reduction.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jackie. Those are all my questions.
Vice Mayor Henderson?
Thank you. Just one, I think. You talked about some of the car-free travel, B-cycle. There's a lot of other stewardship investments that you all have made as well. I know we're meeting about dark skies tomorrow as one example. And so if you have any other examples that you could share with the council, that might be helpful. And again, recognizing you're absolutely not obligating to one or another, just as I as a council member cannot promise someone something because I need 3 votes, you need board votes. It's the same thing. But if you have other examples that you all have contemplated as we go forward.
yeah, I mean, I will say last year we hosted an Australian media individual to showcase our car-free travel. That just costs us hard dollars to host him, to make sure that he has the lodging and the food and things like that. And so, certainly looking at that to then expand the awareness of car-free travel. From a program capacity, I think that there's lots of opportunities out there. I hope that if we do get this restoration, we've been really focused on this process and then not wanting to overcommit to any organizations, but I think we really want to have those discussions. Like I said, we haven't really been able to have a seat at that table because we haven't had the dollars. So now that we can, it's we can be the marketing engine and we could also give you the dollars to move the needle. I think the B cycle and the airport shuttle are certainly the biggest ones. Dark skies is another. Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Remek?
I don't have any further questions, but I am just disclosing that I met with Jackie this morning. So I am very fresh with this conversation and already asked a lot of questions that I'll share more in our deliberation.
Thank you.
No questions from me.
No questions. Okay, I do have a few. Keeping on the theme of stewardship, obviously we have a lot of interest in that. Because I kind of share in the challenge that it sounds like Councilmember Zabriskie experienced in comparing your annual report to the management plan. Because in your annual report, you talk about things like investing in our economy while respecting the character and values of the community. Can you provide a little color to how specifically VTT does that? And I'm going to ask kind of a series of these because I really want our community to understand where you guys are coming from and how you want to represent that for the protection of the community.
Sure. Overnight visitors, I shared this in our presentation, but they do contribute 70% of total spending to our visitor economy. They spend 6 times more. That's really, overnight lodging guests. So that's really why we're focused on driving the overnight visitor. Day visitors are always going to be a part of the equation. We have a beautiful destination that people do want to come and recreate and enjoy. I think really at our core, what we're trying to do is we recognize we have this incredible community and space, and we want to be able to share it with others responsibly and specifically with those who also respect our values. Our community is a little bit reliant on tourism. The local businesses in downtown, they just wouldn't be able to sustain year-round operation if it weren't for the supplemental visitors coming in and out of our community. Our 16,000 residents wouldn't be able to sustain that. So I think that there's a balance, and that's really what we're always trying to seek, is never looking at Christmas visitation, July, August, what have you, but what is an event, bringing the gravel event here during a time in June when people aren't necessarily visiting. creating that opportunity for people to come spend their dollars locally at our local businesses.
Yes, and I also just want to recognize the fact that the marketing that you do while you're targeting people to come here during these special events or off-season, it doesn't mean that they're not seeing that and going, oh, yeah, maybe we'll go there this July, right? I mean, you're still promoting Truckee.
We are, but we're really trying to be thoughtful, right? And so with that, I mean, there's also, we feel a real responsibility to share education, like how to be a better visitor while you're here. Using, drinking Truckee filtered, mountain filtered, using the public transportation. So again, I think it's really just trying to bring in a balance to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Another thing that's in your annual plan or your annual report is enhancing the lives of our residents while safeguarding the mountain environment. So can you provide some color as to how VTT accomplishes that?
I think that really, is kind of reflected in some of the tax burden that is released from our visitors paying that. And we really see that as a benefit. The incredible services that we have, the plowing that we get, the legacy trail that we get to all enjoy, in part, a visitor did help pay for that. So again, I think it's just this balance and recognizing that they are a part of our community's ecosystem.
Okay, and then the last one kind of on this theme, which you've touched on a couple times, VTT invests in visitor education and stewardship. I know in the past you did the trail hosts. Is that part of your current program going forward, intended to go forward?
Not currently. I think it's something that we could certainly look at. I know that was before my time when I came in the organization, but from what I understood, it was a real hot button issue during that time frame when the program was introduced, especially I think it was during COVID. So if that feels like it is still an issue to our community, I think it's something we would certainly look at and figure out how we can better prop up that communication and education. We're also doing that through, our visitor map that we have. There's some great tips in there on how to visit like a pro. Could there be more to do? Absolutely. So we'd love to work with organizations to figure out where the need is on that.
Great, thank you. And then to talk about the 1.4 million in stewardship, in the past, most of that went to funding things like Tart Connect, Truckee Trails, Truckee Donner Land Trust, and other nonprofits that are doing good in our community, and we thank you for that. Looks like in the beginning of your existence, you were funding about 35% of your budget was going towards that. Year to date, you had 25% as of the annual report. And this is kind of what we've talked about. Last year, you had 15% roughly, and this year you're targeting 2%. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And again, that was just a capacity. So as our lodging has stabilized since that peak, visitation, we really wanted to, we sort of had to make some difficult choices and get back to the core of who we are and providing that service to our lodging payers where they're seeing that sort of decline. So we didn't increase that. It remained stable. And that's where I think we can have a meaningful increase in that participation of stewardship funding because that was the most hit.
Mayor, would you mind if I also took a crack at answering that question?
Yeah, just give me one more minute, please.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think because I don't sit on the board. It is kind of curious to me how those decisions are made. You guys are making those decisions. And my last question to you is, how can we support or focus that energy in that area? And I'll do a little preamble to that. I think there's a lot of concern in the community about the excessive visitation. And Visit Truckee Tahoe their primary focus is driving that visitor the overnight lodging and visitors and tourism. And so I'm looking personally for ways that VTT can do things that both have a positive impact on the traveler and on a positive impact on the community, that where the community can see the benefit. And I think we saw that on things like the trail hosts and like plowing the parking lot at West End, because that was impacting that community, right? So these are things that the community saw the benefit of. And so my last question to you is, in what ways do you think this additional funding source could support moving more into those realms to help our community see the benefit of what you bring to us?
Sure, and that's exactly, I think.
And the mitigation of those impacts.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly our intention. We actually, we do the West End snow plowing. We did that this year, which we were happy to do. And I think we haven't really been able to have those conversations with organizations. It's more so just been amplifying all the great work that they're doing. And we really would love to be able to come to them and say, like, where do you need help? Where do you need support from a program side of things? Again, I can't commit specific dollars, right? It has to be approved by our board, but we really do want to be good community stewards and be a partner for the town, for our residents, and really continue education on some of the benefits that visitors can bring to support our local community in a positive way. During realizing that those peak impacts are trouble and hard.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Pallavi, did you have something else to add?
I do, because I think it's important to what you guys keep bringing up with the regards specifically to the percent of dollars allocated on an annual basis, and how you've all absolutely correctly pointed out that not only has that changed, but it has decreased over time. In addition to everything Jackie has already told you, and because I think I'm the last person in the room standing who has been a part of this since day one, what happened in the early years was this organization was saving up a large sum of money to purposely invest in a capital project. Whether it was the ice rink, that was our first shiny thing. Then it was the pickleball courts, that was our second shiny thing. Then it was the skate park, that was the next shiny thing. And then it was, what was after that? Then there was more. There was always a shiny infrastructure project that was gonna cost, and VTT wanted to, it was a wedding venue type of thing, like more of an event center. And VTT always wanted to have a physical thing that they could put their names on to say, hey, this was funded through tourism dollars, and it's this hugely impactful thing that you can now experience and see in the community. We ended up with well over $1 million in reserves. What that allowed, we never spent it. Okay, so what you're seeing in our 5-year budget history is about 5 years ago, we started to spend the money because we realized there wasn't going to be a hockey rink and there wasn't going to be the next big thing. And so we had these larger buckets of hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to say yes to TART Connect. If that started today, under this environment with VT's existing budget, VTT would have been in no way, shape, or form able to say yes to such an investment. So the reason why you're seeing those high percentages in the budget over those early years was because we took this extra $1 million plus that we had in reserves and we spent it down pretty quickly. And then it brought us to a level of basically today where our operating isn't able to invest in anything above and beyond what it costs to just like pay people and do the basic job. So that's why you're seeing that decrease in stewardship spending. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form a distancing or an abandoning of the organization's values
or their spending initiatives or the way that we wanted to do anything. It was simply a financial decision that allowed us to spend more in a few of those bigger years, 20, 21, 22, and then started to tear off as we just didn't have those reserves in the same way to spend. So I just want, that's like the real reason why it went down.
Thank you for that colorization.
Yeah.
And we can't get into deliberation at this point, but I do take issue with it's not a value-based thing because you put your money where your mouth is, right?
But there isn't
where
any,
your priority is, that's where you're
sure, but we don't have
your
$300,000. That's all I'm saying. Like, yes, you're right. Yes, we could have an intern to be our one staff member and have $500,000 to spend on something else. 100%.
Yeah.
It is how we structure the organization.
Or reduce the targeting algorithms,
Whatever.
expenditures, or whatever else.
Yep.
Okay.
All of those things, but I'm more just getting to the facts of it wasn't an
And that
abandoning of values.
historical-
It was just a dollar.
I had forgotten about the big
Yeah.
shiny thing that we were always striving for, so thank you for that reminder. But yeah, I do. It is just clear that when you look at an organization's budget, you see their priorities. I think everybody would agree that that's what they see when they look at the town of Truckee's budget as well. Okay, so with that, are there any other questions? So we'll open it up for public comment. If anybody has a public comment on this agenda item, please step forward to the podium. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name. And at the conclusion of your comment, if you could fill out a comment card for us, please, that'd be great. Thank you. Oh, can you turn the microphone back on?
Mayor and council members, my name is Kyle Overacker. I'm the general manager at the proud new Martis Valley Lodge, what used to be the Hampton Inn and Suites here in town. Also the treasurer on the Visit Truckee Tahoe board. I did not prepare specific comments or speech, but I just was hoping to respond to some of the things that I've heard that have been spoken about tonight. From my knowledge and awareness, and to elaborate on what Councilmember Pallavi has said, I was not here or a part of Visit Truckee Tahoe in the years during COVID, but I can say unequivocally today that Visit Truckee Tahoe's finances do not support much beyond just the general operating. Personally, I'm new to this town. I'm in year 3. I love being here. I plan to be here for the rest of my life. But I come from both other large and small markets, and I can say for me, a destination marketing organization is solely and inherently driven on talent as far as what it's able to accomplish. I'm here to advocate for the talent that we do have. As a business operator here in town, it's extremely hard to find good people to operate the hotel. I'll speak to that in a moment, but I'm an advocate of Visit Truckee Tahoe. We have great people. We had great people. Colleen retired. We're very fortunate to have great people, and it's so important that we give them the tools and the keys to an organization that can actually operate and not constrict that organization, because that talent, in my opinion, would run out the door, and there's nobody that's going to come in and be able to do the same job. As far as talent at my hotel, so to speak to the topic of the peak periods and is Visit Truckee Tahoe marketing and trying to sell the peak periods, I can speak, serving on the board, that that's not the case. But what I can say is I think we all have a very recent memory of Truckee and the greater Tahoe area succeeding during the COVID years, and we've seen nothing but decline year over year since the COVID years. And I think that, as Jackie has said in prior meetings, we're plateauing, we're discovering where that is. But as a business operator, if the peak periods are not what they are, and if the shoulder seasons can't get there, then we are unfortunately laying off or unable to provide work for the workers that we are, prior to this conversation, talking about very desperately needing to be able to house. So from my experience, Visit Truckee Tahoe is invested in sustainability, but beyond that, it's so important that we market the town and
Thank you, Kyle.
Support our staff.
Thank you, Kyle. Is there additional public comment?
Good evening. I'm Paco Lindsay, Truckee resident for a long time. Council, staff. What I kind of want to address in this agenda item, what I want to focus on is the optimization of STRs. I'm asking that not go forward. I think STRs should be relooked at. And I don't mean get rid of them, keep them completely. I just think we haven't had a robust conversation for quite some time about STRs. We landed on the number of 1255. If I'm not mistaken, that was basically the number that we had back then. There wasn't any science behind it. That was the number that we landed on. We just had the last discussion item was about housing. I've stood up here, I was on GPAC, housing. To me, one of the 500-pound gorillas, though, is that 1,255 homes are locked up. They can't be rented. Whether that's good or bad, I just think that conversation needs to be had again. Like, how many do we need? The optimization thing, I know I had this conversation back in the SDR debate up here and in GPAC was about, I look at SDRs like, okay, they're not necessarily always bad, but who owns them? I mean, like, for instance, I have friends in town that have an SDR. They leave for the holidays and they rent it out. It helps them have the home. I applaud that. That doesn't bother me. I happen to live in Tahoe down there. I have about me 5 STRs around me. They're all corporate owned. Nobody ever comes there who owns it. They're corporate owned. They're hotels. And here we are talking about housing, and now yet we allow houses to become hotels. So what I'm asking is in this agenda item is to continue with it, but take out the optimization of STRs. I want to minimize STRs, or I want to relook at STRs. As you guys know, I run campaigns. I'm pretty familiar with campaigns. I'll be kind of halfway cocky to say, I think somebody could probably run this fall and say, I want Truckee back for people, get rid of STRs, and they have a damn good chance of winning, pardon my French. So I'm just saying I want to open up that conversation again. I don't want to just jump on and assume that that number is the correct number. I think the whole thing needs to get outside the box and be relooked at again. So that's where I'm at, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Paco. Are there any other public comments on this agenda item? Please come up. If anybody else has a comment, if they could come in to the podium, that'd be great.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. And a couple things. I've been an owner since 1999. I've been a full-time resident for 6 years now. And I put on retreats. I'm involved in marketing retreats and things like that. And the amount of money that we spend to bring people to these areas it's overwhelming. And I just got involved with this group, just this year, in fact. And what I saw was a group of people who basically couldn't do the job they would like to do because they had given their money back because of COVID, and now people say we're going to increase. We're really not increasing anything. We're restoring back to what they had before COVID so that they can continue to do the job that they were doing back then. They have new leadership, they have new ideas, and I think that it's really important to take part in this larger structure that is going on. And I'm part of the mountain bike community, and there are all sorts of events that are being taken place in Quincy and in all these little areas. Truckee, we talk about we don't have this, we don't have that. We've got enough housing, we've got enough camping, we've got all these different things that we can do as a center point for a lot of these various events. I know that there was a big yoga event at Squaw Valley. I don't know if they still do it or not, but these events are happening more and more and more, and the Sierra Butte's stewardship is looking to start expanding, and they're expanding the types of events they're having. And I think Truckee should be the hub, and I think that the Visitors Bureau should be a part of that conversation, as well as many others. I've heard a lot of the things that they'd like to do, and that's why I'm back here again, and I want to start taking part within their organization. I'm not not part of the organization. I'm a local resident that wants to be involved and wants to help in any way it can. So I really hope that you give this 2% back, restore it back to us so that they can use it to start marketing us. And it is off season. I mean, we don't have to go after the 4th of July crowd. I live in Tahoe Downer. It's busy. And lots of my friends are like, oh, we hate all those lowlanders. I'm going, hold on a second. They're funding the businesses, the restaurants that you want to have open during these on non-peak hours or non-peak days. You have to give and take a little. So, I mean, it's a little bit of arrogance and a little bit of, I got mine, I don't want anybody else to have it. But it's like, no. We need to be a larger community to start drawing to us the finances that we need and also the attention that we need, because other areas are going to start taking it. You know, you got Mammoth, you got Bear, there's all sorts of little areas, and they're doing a really good job at pulling. I just got something from Mount Bachelor the other day. Come on up in the springtime, and we've got ski clinics, and so things like that really need to be focused on, and this is what this organization is doing. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can you tell us your name?
My name is Robert Rudlick.
Robert, thank you so much for coming and speaking.
You're welcome.
Hi, Madam Mayor, council members. I'll be really quick. My name is Jason Toops. We were asking, how does VGT give back to the community? And I think there was one we forgot to mention, which is Truckee Pride, first week of June. VGT is actually one of our biggest supporters in the town. I think they were our first real supporter in town. Truckee Pride is run entirely by locals. It's entirely grassroots. We all off donations. It's really off the back of David Mack himself. Like, it's an amazing effort. And VGT helps, they donate, but we would not be able to market it in the way that we do without their know-how and their expertise. And it's the first week of June, which I think counts as shoulder season here, barely, kind of. So I just wanted to add that to the list of things that they've supported, and I've been personally impacted by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any other public comments on this? Seeing none, we're going to close public comment and bring it back for council deliberation. Councilmember Zabriskie, you started us off. Do you want to kick off the deliberation?
Well, I asked Carissa what were tourism's negative impacts, perceived impacts, and she mentioned affordability. And then, of course, there's also the traffic and parking. What I've seen from the answers on the questions, the written questions posed, is VTT has done a lot to try and reduce traffic from tourism. And while I'm not getting a commitment, I am getting a representation or a very strong implication that they will continue to do so. On the housing, so we have 14,000 housing units. More than half of them are second homes, so that's more than 7,000. And then the STRs are permitted are 1,255. So that's about 9% of the housing stock. And we're looking at over 40% of the housing stock that is second homes, which is a potential source of housing. I guess that's all to say I'm not really seeing that STRs are driving up the price of housing. Maybe we should be making efforts to reduce the number of STRs, but even with the vacant ones, we have a waiting list of people. We struck a compromise when we set that number at 1,255. So I guess I'm open to a further discussion about STRs, but in some ways, I'm looking at other ways to increase housing, and I don't see VTT as contributing to our housing crisis. And I haven't heard any other things really to say how VTT is hurting our community. I think there is a lot of misperception. I appreciate the traffic and parking issue, but then there's the revenue that comes along with it that supports our businesses. I'm proud of VTT. I can criticize small things. I wish they were explicitly making a commitment to put aside 25% of a budget to destination stewardship, but I still think they might do so.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Okay. Well, thank you to Jackie and everyone from VTT for being here this evening. I think you made a really strong case during your presentation just a couple of weeks ago in January, just related to your revenues and program capacity, stewardship opportunities with appropriate funding that really gets you back to where you were previously. At the end of the day, we need really strong partners. We don't get anything done in this town unless we have really strong partners. And VTT has been an incredibly strong partner to the town. Based on my experience and everything that I've witnessed VTT do in my 6 years on this dais now, I trust that you have our community's best interests at heart. I've seen your investments in stewardship-focused programming and initiatives, and your investments in getting the types of tourists that share our values, that share our mountain values, that share our environmental tourism values. And at the end of the day, we rely on tourism. It's what makes our town churn. So I am in favor of approving the VTT annual report for fiscal year 25-26 and adopting resolution 2603, adjusting the TBID assessment.
Okay, Councilmember Romack.
Yeah, thank you. You know, this goes without saying, but we live in an amazing place. And we're all in this room lucky enough that we get to live here. And I was talking about, you know, going to a 6-year-old birthday party on the mountain this weekend, and we get to walk our dogs on the Legacy Trail, and we get to have incredible restaurants and local businesses in our downtown that we get to enjoy all the time. And we have to acknowledge a lot of that we're able to have here because of tourism. It is a balance, and we know there are challenges and there are frustrations from all of us when you forget and you go to the grocery store on July 3rd and it was like, why did I do that? But yet, then on that fall day, that's so beautiful, and you can have this whole place and do whatever you want. And we're able to, again, have all of this thanks to our tourism economy. I appreciate, Jackie, your time this morning. We talked through a lot of things and talked through a lot of this. You know, I think there were questions earlier on the management district plan, and it says year-round tourism, but yet the focus is on, you know, shoulder seasons. I think it's important for VTT to be able to be nimble. And so I recognize that by having in the management district plan talking year round, it gives the opportunity. If we wouldn't have had a Christmas snowstorm this year, it might have been really bad come January. And maybe this would have been a time where VTT would have wanted to spend a little bit more marketing to get people to come here. So want to give them a little bit of flexibility. So if we're seeing challenges, they're able to react to things and help our local businesses and our local community. I do share, you know, a lot of the comments brought up that stewardship is really important, and without VTT's funding, we wouldn't have been able to probably get to where we are with TART Connect. And now we've got a funding source for that, and that's fantastic. So I would love to see more dollars dedicated towards stewardship initiatives. I think it's great, as we talked this morning and you brought up today, the airport shuttle. You know, when people drive up from the Bay Area with their car, it's really easy for them to just keep getting in their car and driving everywhere. When they fly into the Reno airport and they can take a shuttle to Truckee, then they have to take TART Connect. And then they're taking our transit system. And then there's less impacts on our local community because they're not clogging up the roadways with their car. So I really enjoy that you are already thinking that way, and, you know, ideas of how can this help the local community. I know in the past, the airport shuttle used to have like a discount if you bought 10 rides. You know, maybe by subsidizing things like that, it could get back to something like that locals could utilize, because we fly out of the Reno airport a few times a year, and then you could buy that and have a cheaper discount that's helping being subsidized by tourism dollars. So I understand, you know, you don't want to commit to a certain percentage, but would just encourage to everyone in this room who's part of VTT to continue looking at ways to invest in the things you hear from our community. And then would remind council that they do present an annual report to us every year. So every year we have an opportunity to continue to weigh in, and we like what we saw this year. We'd love to see more of this or more of that. So just appreciate what you're doing and the openness to have conversations and talk through challenges and issues. So keep doing that as well. And then lastly, I said it on the last item, but I will just highlight again, I'm not excited about looking at STR optimization. I'm supportive of going to the 2% TBID. That is something that's totally on the visitors. It would already be in lodging that is open for lodging's sake and is being utilized. I am concerned again that the STR ordinance was not set up for monetary reasons, as you brought up, Mayor. It was set up to really speak to neighborhood concerns. And again, by just blanketly optimizing now, we might have unintended consequences. That said, also open to continued ideas. Again, there's creative people in this room, so if there are ideas and ways to address some of those neighborhood concerns, open to those as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Romack. Councilmember Pallavi?
I'm going to try to not take us on a 10-year tour of my life in VTT slash TBID land, but I do think it's important because I was reflecting on some of the things that you've all said so far. And when I was 16 and I was in high school, I actually chose to leave my family and move up to Vermont for the summertime and work in the tourism industry because I was really seeking out the benefits of sort of what that lifestyle at least envisioned and entailed in my mind, and it lived up to that. When I went to college, again, chose a school in a tourism town, had a horse racing connection. And in the month of August, the community went from a 10,000 person town to a 90,000 person town for the span of 45 days. It was insane. But why did I choose to live there? Yet again, there was something kept me coming back there, and then finally landed out here in this amazing place. And when I was listening to Councilmember Zabriskie ask the ever so daunting question, what is so bad about tourism? You could pretty much ask anybody in this room and anybody in our community what they would say, and you're going to get about 1 million different answers. And my reply, because I have that conversation quite often when people are like, I can't even get to your store because the road's all clogged up. I'm like, yeah, because everybody wants to be here. And why did you choose to move here, person? And their answer usually is because it's freaking awesome and I want to be there. And it's fascinating to me because tourism communities, if that's even what we call it, or tourism-based economies, are places that we all want to be and strive to be. And the stewardship of them is why we sit here and why we're doing these jobs and why we have all these impacts that we're trying to fix and do something with to make it a community that can function year round for the resident, for the business owner, for everybody, for the visitor, right? And it's all about that balance. A couple of your questions, Mayor, in my opinion, our historic downtown doesn't even exist without a tourism economy. And then we wouldn't have this thing that creates this sense of place for all of us that we continually invest in and enhance and spend all of this time building parks around and putting new projects in and making them more walkable. And we wouldn't have any of that investment if we weren't catering to some level to a visitor and to a local who want to experience that incredible sense of place that we embody. How has VTT invested to enhance the local way of life? It's been said multiple times. I'll just use the example of Tart Connect one more time. Without that stewardship investment, without us holding those reserves for a big shiny object, now we have 12 medium-sized shiny objects driving around town, driving everybody where they want to go on freaking demand. That's insane, right? Like, show me where else this is happening. And then lastly, the positive impacts both to the community and to the visitor. And I'm going to point to one of the absolutely most incredible recent projects out in Johnson Canyon. And if you guys have not been to Johnson Canyon yet, get out there. Land Trust, Visit Truckee Tahoe was an investor in that project. Visit Truckee Tahoe is going to continue to invest in some of the improvements that they're looking to make over there. But if that's not a piece of infrastructure, while it's not shiny, it's a bit dull and it's mostly asphalt, it is a huge impact to getting us to a place of safe recreation, of pointing people where a visitor can go right off I-80 without even having to come into town and spend $1. They can avoid all of that and just now go straight to Johnson Canyon if they so wish. And if we ever get that snow play area, or if we ever get enough snow on the eastern side of town, then we will also have one there. And we'll have succeeded in sort of dispersing some of these impacts. Again, as many of you know, I've been on the Visit Truckee Tahoe board since before it was Visit Truckee Tahoe. I think going to 2%, mostly because this is something that the assessed folks have chosen to proceed with and already approved. In my opinion, us five are a rubber stamp. If people want to collect more tax on their own businesses, we should let them. We should make sure it's driven and invested wisely. But these are people talking about assessing themselves at the end of the day to do something both that creates a better community for those of us who live, work, and play here, but also for those of us who visit here. And I know that we all want to attach strings to how this money will be spent. That is already within the MDP. Council has had an opportunity to provide that. And the VTT board, at least in my experience, has been incredibly, has had incredible foresight, has had incredible judgment, and has made extremely intelligent investments with their very limited funds over the years. So I do support us taking the action in front of us tonight.
Thank you for that trip down memory lane. Okay, so I do want to be clear. Even though I asked some really targeted questions, I am not anti-tourism. I recognize that is part of who we are, and that is part of why it's such an attractive place to live. But I also recognize that tourism creates negative impacts that we have all experienced in one way or another. This organization I was particularly really excited about when it was first conceived, when Patty Baird was on the board, and it was really a focus on achieving an international destination stewardship certification. You know, it's pretty, talk about lofty goals. I recognize that that's no longer the focus, but to go from that to a 2% budget on stewardship is just, that to me was really alarming. That raised some red flags. So what I'm really trying to achieve here is some clarity on the fact that there are ways that Visit Truckee Tahoe in the past has participated in programs, stood at programs, funded programs, supported things that have touched both the visitor and the resident. And I want to really underscore the importance that I feel we need to focus on that, because we do have some naysayers. We do have some people that are gonna come back and say, why would you give them more money? We don't need anybody else here. But we have the opportunity to positively impact their lives as well. And those are the areas that I would really love to see VTT with this additional funding of 0.75% that they have chosen to tax themselves, and I agree that that is their purview to do so. So we've already talked about a few of the things, but I'll just run through a few more ideas that I had to share with you. I really do think that trail stewardship program was a positive impact for both visitors and the community, because they saw the people out there and they saw that we were trying to make a difference in how people treated our natural environment, treated our trails, treated our rivers, treated our lakes. So I'd love to see a commitment to having those out again. Tourism creates a lot of litter. I would love to see VTT participate in some of our litter cleanup efforts. We have multiple of them throughout town. We have Truckee Litter Corps, we have Truckee Day, we have Clean Up the Lake. We have all sorts of opportunities for that, and I think that's a direct impact of tourism that, again, the community could see your positive impact and influence on. One of the biggest impacts of our tourists is, and I'm seeing this even more obviously or distinctly now in the winter, is on Donner Lake. Yes, it's severely impacted during the summer, and we all know that. But now we're seeing impacts of a lot of visitors. You know, we just had a dry January, and there's been people out on those docks, and there's no trash collection, and there's no restrooms. Maybe VTT could partner with the Parks and Rec, TDRPD, and help mitigate some of those impacts. Councilmember Zabriskie talked about potentially participating or helping us stand up an aquatic invasive species inspection program. I think that's another great opportunity. We do the stenciling every year. I think that's something that would be pretty easy to participate in. So these are all things that I think our community would see, and the visitors would be positively impacted from as well. So I really would love to see a commitment of 25% annual revenues at this new level towards something related to either sustainability, stewardship, or tourism mitigation. That would be my ask. And I understand that you need to create that or have that flexibility, but that would be my ultimate expectation, given all that this community does to support the lodging and the visitorship in all the different ways that we contribute to that. I think that would be a really wonderful target and goal for Visit Truckee Tahoe to give back to the community. So those would be my asks. And with that, if there's any other comments based on either Councilmember Pallavi's commentary or mine, I'd welcome that at this point before we finalize this discussion item. Anything else? No? Anything else on the side? Councilmember Zabriskie? Microphone. Microphone, please. Your microphone, please.
You're asking whether we're willing to make these points conditions of the resolution?
I would love to see that a condition of the resolution, if that's something that you would, the 25%, and then we could reference back all the different ideas that we have provided.
I'm going to put my faith in VTT to do that on their own.
Okay. All right. Anything else that you need from council and direction tonight, Carissa?
We do need a motion.
Oh, we do need, because it's a resolution.
I'll move that we approve the annual report and adopt resolution 2026-03.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes. Okay. We are on to council reports. And we do have one closed session item after that.
I can start with the reports. I participated in the full-day strategic retreat for council. I attended the Muse launch with the Cultural District. Muse is a new publication. It's a guide to local arts and culture, promoting artists, art producers, and cultural heritage of Nevada County across the east and the west parts of the county. I met with a small group with Councilmember Klostad, Jen Calloway, and a few others with Congressman Ami Berra. He's really interested in the rural issues impacting our region, so he can effectively advocate for resources for us at the federal level. I mentioned already that I'm meeting with Jackie and Kelly Cutler tomorrow about dark skies, so I'll have more to report next time. And this is a little corny, but it's Valentine's Day this Saturday. So grab somebody that you love and hug them, because we need more love right now.
Thank you. Councilmember Zabriskie?
Attended the Truckee River Basin Watershed Group meeting, which included updates on the stream flow, reservoir levels, fisheries, and snowpacks. Then there was a Prosser Firewise meeting planning for the summer. Truckee North Tahoe Transportation Management Association meeting included updates on the ski resort shuttles and their the really great success they're having. That's in part in collaboration with VTT, working with them to increase the shuttles to the ski resorts. And then there was going over the state and local budget, and then upcoming projects. Then there was a Homeless Action Coalition meeting update on the opening, the ribbon cutting this Friday, and then we expect to actually open the facility to the homeless before the end of the month. And then did a radio interview with Veronica on the Homeless Action facility out on Deerfield.
Thank you for all of those services.
Sure.
Councilmember Romack.
Yeah, I attended the Placer County Board of Supervisors had a little meeting tour at the North Star Community Services District where there was a presentation on their wood energy facility. And they do hope to go to construction this year. And just interesting, and something that was shared that I didn't realize is it would be bringing in bone dry tons. I lose the terminology from the Eastern Regional Landfill Cabin Creek area. So it's not just getting rid of stuff in North Star, but stuff that is going to the landfill from our whole region. Again, it's just a small percentage because it's a small facility, but just exciting that that is moving forward. And then today attended the Truckee Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors meeting. Always great to hear from them. And I think that was it.
And that facility is actually going to also have a battery backup system. It's really cool. Councilmember Pallavi.
It was also on the radio, so it was a good radio week for our town council members. Did a community spotlight on housing. I had an opportunity, the Mountain Pact, you guys all get emails. I actually finally saw Anna, like what her actual face looks like, which we all get a million emails from her. So that was kind of cool. But we did a Zoom, Supervisor Bullock, couple some council members from Mammoth, Inyo, and met with Congressman Kiley for about an hour, actually, on like last Monday when they were last Monday when they were also coming back to pass a bunch of bills. I was surprised he gave us a full hour, so that was great. We had a Visit Truckee Tahoe board meeting to prepare for this, and that, I believe, is mostly it. And then I was able to join the call with the attorney on the funding options this week as well. That was interesting. So
A challenging call.
Say again?
What did you cover with
The congressman was quite interesting. He was very coy. I think it was the Mono County supervisor who actually came out and asked him what his plan was for rerunning. And he absolutely avoided that at that point. And then we spoke mostly about outdoor recreation. It was mostly about outdoor recreation, public lands, and his support for the Public Lands Caucus as it was moving through, and for not supporting all the sell-offs that were going in there. We put in a chime, even though it's a Senate thing.
The sell-off of land?
Sell-off, that was happening in the last session. Thanked him for that, and then focused on sort of what's happening in the next section. Talked about potentially him opposing, even though it's going to be a confirmation in the Senate, the new nominee for BLM is quite an interesting fella as well. And Congressman Kiley taking some more stands on some of the public lands issues, and really just how our economies and our public lands are so intertwined, and to fully fund our public agencies that support our public land. So a lot was talked about human resource constraints at local National Forest Office and how those were affecting projects both for wildfire and recreation, and trying to just give him more local examples. So he was good. He's been really receptive on those topics. So
Thank you very much for representing us and our interests on those. Appreciate it. So last week, Jen Calloway and I went down to the Nevada County Board of Supervisors retreat and participated in a panel discussion with the other incorporated cities. We had our retreat and then spent a little time with Ami Bera, who looks like might be pitching a run for our congressional district. Also met with Dr. Rob Darzen-Kowich, I'm going to always mess it up, about some items going on with the hospital and trying to collaborate with both the town and the school district on youth mental health efforts. And that's about it. Prepared for the council meeting. So we do have, wait, don't we? Yes, we do have a closed session. So we are meeting, it's a real property negotiations with APN 19-112-001. We're meeting with our agency negotiators, Jen Calloway, town manager, Andy Morris, town attorney, Becky Carr, town engineer, public works director. Do we have any public comment on our closed session item? Seeing none, we will adjourn to closed session and we will see you all back here on February 24th at 5 p.m.